Okay. Fuck me, but it's been a while. Hello, hi. I'm TV Skyn, and very occasionally, it's supposed to be monthly. It's supposed to be monthly, but very occasionally, as it's turned out more realistically, I do a Q&A podcast where people who support me in whatever way, YouTube memberships, a donation once upon a time, Patreon, whatever gives you access to the supporter rooms on Discord, will ask questions, and I'll do a Q&A about them, and then I'll answer the questions in the Q&A. And the last time I did one of these was, I think, in November last year, October, something like that, something along those lines. It was a while ago. Could have been September. I genuinely don't remember. So it's been a bit. It's been a hot minute, and it's one of those things of, I have the goddamn room in my Discord, and I see all the questions come in, and I go, oh shit, I should do that soon, and then I don't. And then I see the question, and I go, oh shit, I need to remember to do that thing, and then I don't. And then I see it, and I was like, oh fuck, gotta set some time aside, to do the thing, and then I don't. It's one of those things. It's one of those specific things, and like, everything else in my life now, I'm gonna blame it on my ADHD, and I'm gonna be right, because it is an executive dysfunction thing of everything else in my life is like, all the other obligations I have, everything else I need to work on, everything else I need to do is more important, technically, than this, because this is not like, this is not the thing that makes my rent, right? And so everything else sort of in the hierarchy of priorities in my brain, everything else takes priority over this. And yeah, it's bad cycles. But here we are. I'm here now. I'm gonna do the thing. So, Matrox DX asks, well, I think about wrestling. Yes, Super Eye Patch Wolf's video has made me give a shit about wrestling storylines, but I have resisted the urge to actually get into wrestling, again, by successfully leveraging my ADHD to protect me. But it's by having the thought multiple times, maybe I should check out wrestling at some point. Maybe I should see what the deal is, what the fuss is about, and then I don't. And that has kept me safe from developing any kind of a new obsession, which is good, because I don't have time for one. But I did question, as a fellow parent to sibling kitties, has there been some game or interaction with them that you didn't expect to enjoy as much as you do? No, I love cats. I had a cat for like 15 years when I was a kid, who I loved absolutely to death, and I was her favorite. My sister insists that she was also her favorite, and so does my mom, but I was her favorite, and we played together, and it was lovely. Nothing surprising me about these cats. They are cats in the way that I know cats. And yeah, no, I guess the thing I wouldn't expect was just how fucking clingy these two are, because the cat I used to have, she was like a Russian blue, I think, and she was one of those cats who's like clingy but don't touch me, right? So you go to a room, she's there. Like she just happens to go to the same room, and this is just where I happen to want to be now. Don't touch me, leave me alone, but you also don't go anywhere without me. And she was fuzzy, and she was very eccentric and like very specific. Like she would only drink water from the tap when it was running, but only if someone was there with her to see her drinking the water. Right? If we went out there, we turned on the tap, let her drink, and then we left, she would come running after us like, meow, meow, meow. And then we have to go, yes, okay, right, go to the bathroom, watch her drink until she's done, and then turn off the tap, and then, go on with your life. She was very eccentric in that way. Like, she had a lot of very specific, particular, odd habits. Same thing with eating. She would not eat alone. She simply wouldn't do it. These cats, though, like, they are cuddly and clingy in a different way. Today, like, there's some what are they called? VVS. Plumber people who needed to do some work for the company that owns the building that we live in, right? Like, there's some plumbing work that needs to be done. So, like, 5 dudes in and out of our apartments, like, changing out sensors on the radiators and, like, changing out pipes and shit. And so I put the cats in one of the bathrooms, just kind of keep them away from all that, and so that they didn't get into anything that they weren't supposed to get into. And they were out there for, like, an hour and a half, right? Like, just locked away. They have their litter box and the food. But then when the plumber guys were gone and done with the work that they have to do, and I like went out there and opened up the door, or I like no, not when they were gone. While they were out there, while the plumbers were working, I went out and checked on them, and they were so clean. Like they got so like Artemis came over and like tried to climb my leg, and she wanted to be hugged, and she wanted to be held, and she was very insistent on that. And Apollo also was like very, very clingy, because they didn't like being left alone out there. They didn't like to be closed away out there with strange noises happening. Like they seek a lot of comfort in us. Like Artemis, like when I'm in my office working, occasionally I'll let her in to sort of just run around and do stuff, and she will jump in my lap, and then she'll climb up on my chest, and then she'll curl up, and then she'll cuddle. Right? Like she'll climb up on my chest, and I'll have to lean back in my chair, and then she'll curl up, and then she'll just lay there and purr her little heart out and insist on being cuddled. And because she's a fucking gremlin, she can't sit still for 5 minutes. Like, so she'll curl up, she'll lay down, she'll start purring, and then she'll get up, and then she'll like spin around, like stick her fucking claws in my chest, and then she'll lay down again, and then she'll get up, and like, it's very it makes it fucking impossible to do work. But she's incredibly clingy. They are incredibly clingy. They're incredibly affectionate, in a way that my old childhood cat wasn't. So that's been lovely. They are dopamine batteries. They have made my life immeasurably better simply by being here, even though they keep destroying things. We had a lovely floor vase, like a glass thing with like decorative like branches in it and stuff like that, and that, you know, that went within the first month of those little fuckers being in the house. They just crash, bonk. We should have taped it to the floor. It happens. Anyway. Shade, is there any chance of us getting a boss designs of Hollow Knight? I feel like you enjoy Hallownest. Yes, I have enjoyed Hallownest twice in my playthroughs, actually, but I think someone already told you that in the room. But this sort of is of a kind with the next question from Hamihime, which is also, will there be more boss designs videos, and if so, Soulsborne games or others? And I've sort of spoken about this before. There are a couple of other series that might be suitable, excuse me, for a boss designs style analysis. I feel like Hollow Knight is one of them, but also that game has been analyzed to death. I feel like I genuinely don't know, because I've already played it twice, right? I'm not going in blind. I'm conscious of all the other readings. I know about the other theories. I'm not confident that I'd have anything... Why is it always hiccups when I'm trying to record? I'm not confident that I'd have a unique perspective. I'm not really confident that I'd have something special to say on my own. Like, I'm sure if I dive into it and I really focus my attention on it and like all that, probably I could find something. But Hollow Knight in particular, I don't know that I would have anything super special to say about it myself. Maybe Silksong. I don't know. I'd have to play it first. I think, yeah, and similarly, Resident Evil is another series that I think would be a possible candidate for like a boss design style series about those games. Like, in part, both because they tend to be a lot shorter than Souls games, but also because they do a lot of... Because, like, the format of boss designs is specifically about, like, okay, let's take this one character design, like this one little piece of the game, and extract narrative meaning from it, right? And that's not something that works with every game. Like, not every game concentrates a lot of their storytelling into their boss characters. Like, even Souls games, like, where the bosses tend to be very important encounters, it's not always, like, the boss characters are not always the most potent vessels of delivering the game's messages and ideas. That's something that's very specific to From Software, is that they have a real fixation with the bosses as a means of delivering story, as a means of delivering meaning. Resident Evil, I think, maybe could support a similar idea. Certainly Village would be able to. Resident Evil Village is very much structured around its boss encounters, right? And I think, like, I've not really played a ton of Resident Evil, but some of those games might be able to. Like, certainly Silent Hill 2 could sustain a boss design style series, but again, Silent Hill 2 is one of those games of, like, do I have anything unique to say about that? Like, am I going to analyze that in a way that 400 people haven't already? I'm not really confident. Like, and that's really the determinant, is like, I don't want to go into trying to make a boss design style series about something if I don't feel like I have a unique perspective to offer on it. I feel like I have that on Souls games. Like I feel like I've done pretty well at that, at like having a unique look, a unique angle on those games. But I wouldn't be able to do it with every game, right? Like I would have to invent, I think for other games I would have to invent a different format than the boss designs format. Like I've thought about maybe like something for Final Fantasy, right? Like the monster designs of Final Fantasy, because like Final Fantasy, like I've always felt like there was something to the idea that you could tell the story of Final Fantasy by sort of looking at the way that its iconic monsters, recurring monsters and characters change from installment to installment. Like the way that Cid changes from game to game, the way that bombs change from game to game, the way that like Bahamut changes from game to game, the way that Ultima Weapon changes from game to game. I've always felt like there was something there. I don't know exactly how I would structure it, like in terms of like if it would be able to be structured like a Let's Play, right? That's the other thing, is like the boss designs is half Let's Play, half analysis. Does that work for every game series and franchise? Not necessarily, no, because Final Fantasy is like, that's a fucking dialogue-heavy RPG series, right? Like with a fuck ton of cutscenes, and there's only so much you can really do to edit gameplay around that. Like where the Souls games, on the other hand, are like, you just go and you just do shit, right? Like you wake up in a place and then the Souls games just kind of go, yeah, go fuck around, see what happens. Whereas something like Final Fantasy is like, especially in something like Final Fantasy 13, for example, it's like, that's not how that works, right? Like, I don't know that I could do the gameplay segment of that and that. Like, so it depends, right? The boss designs format is a very specific format for a very specific series. It might be able to be adapted into a few other things, but it's like, I would rather think about, I think the thing I'm trying to get to is, I would rather think about, okay, what else can I do other than just trying to replicate the formula of boss designs over and over again? Could I maybe come up with a new format for something somewhere, right? Because I tried the boss designs format kind of on Nier Automata, and it didn't work. Like, there were many reasons why those videos didn't get the number of views that I wanted them to get, and like why they really kind of tanked the algorithm, but it also just didn't really work. It did not work the way that it does for Souls games, to just sort of transplant that onto that particular game. So, yeah, Anyway, Flint and Steel, a few league questions. Is there a region you find most compelling, most interesting? Freljord. I think my favorite region is the Freljord. Specifically because it has a rock-solid structure. Like a fundamental rock-solid structure, which is the story of the three sisters, like, repeating and echoing up through time that, like, Avarosa, Cyrilda, and Lysandra, once upon a time, like, Lysandra lost her sisters. Now, her sisters' ghosts are coming back to haunt her in the present day in the form of Ash and Sejuani, and they have their own, like, sister dynamic, right? Like, they have their own sister relationship, and, like, there's this meditation on the role of mothers, families, sisters, what it means to be a community, like this conflict that exists between Sejuani having this thing of like, well, it's like whoever is strong enough to take has the right to have, right? Like the rule of the fittest, right? Which is like reflected in the way that Volibear works. And then we have Ash, who's like, no, this is about community. Like, those who can do the most will do those things for those who can do the least, right? Like this thing of like mutual support, mutualism, and aid, which is like embodied very much in Ornn, who at the same time is also like a grumpy pants who doesn't want to acknowledge that he really cares for like his surrounding family units, right? There's a bunch of really strong characterization going on there. Like, I think Udyr and Sejuani's relationship is really fucking interesting, for example. I think Lysandra's relationship to the ghost of her sisters is interesting. The way that they cast her, especially in Song of Nunu, as someone who is, like, consumed by a deep sorrow, really sort of brings her back to like, it brings to mind for me a little bit Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, right? Which was the basis for Frozen, but Frozen is nothing like it. Like this idea of sorrow as this shard of ice that freezes you solid, and the way that interacts with the idea of true ice, and like this like Lissandra essentially sitting on the frozen tomb of her own trauma, which she's just holding down because she does not want to deal with it. She cannot face it because it is this overwhelming, totalizing terror that she thinks is going to destroy her entire world if she actually deals with it, which is like the betrayal she did of her sisters is the thing that's, like, thematically speaking, is the thing that's threatening to destroy her, and which she does not want to face, which is why she's spending so much effort trying to hold it down. And Ashe and Sejuani as these rising leaders on the Freljord forcing her into a confrontation with it because she can no longer just dominate and destroy everything. Ashe and Sejuani are too powerful. She'll have to deal with her trauma. That will be the event when, like, the Howling Abyss breaks and the Void spills back again, and the Battle of the Three Sisters and the Howling Abyss is reenacted. This time with, like, the good guys being the winners, presumably. Like, that would be the current that the tropes are flowing towards, right? That, I think, is really compelling. It's that I really like what the Freljord promises to be, like what the Freljord could be if it's explored properly. I really quite like that. Second, is there a character whose lore is currently outside of the updated world that you think will pose a challenge to be integrated into the current storylines? Skarner? Once upon a time? No, I don't think there's any character that's like... As we've seen with Skarner, there isn't really a challenge. Like, you can just retcon whatever the fuck you want, right? Like, you can just, like, if need be, delete the old champion, make a new champion with the same name, and a sort of vaguely similar concept to come from, and there you go, problem fixed, right? Like, that's the thing they did with Galio. Like, Trundle, Galio, like, you can just kind of remake the character from scratch. That's not really a problem. But, like... on the note of Skarner, characters whose lore will have trouble being integrated into current storylines is like, well, I did a whole video about that with why Arcane can't be canon, right? Like, you asked your question long before I did that video, to be fair. Which is like, Zeri, Seraphine, and Ezreal are all mages, and if you're gonna go with the Arcane concept of Piltover and so on, where there are no mages, like, they're just... I'm sorry, like, people sort of listened to that video but did not hear a fucking word I was saying, apparently, because people got so fixated. Well, there is magic in the Arcane world. Yes, there is magic, but it's fucking rare, and there are, and this is explicit within the fucking show, there are no mages in Piltover and Zaun in Arcane. There are no mages in the city. There simply aren't. Like, it is explicitly shown that there is no magic within the borders of Piltover and Zaun. That does not make any fucking sense with the state of the world of Runeterra as it is, because it is fucking tripping magic. Like, it is magic up to the fucking tits, right? Magic is everywhere in Runeterra. Runeterra is an extremely high magic setting, and Arcane is a very low magic setting. And you can't have a low magic setting on the one hand, and then on the other hand also, oh yeah, by the way, Zeri is just a mage who's like been running around throwing lightning bolts everywhere. Seraphine is a mage who has like the power of magical empathy, who can just cause people to feel a certain way, who can in some ways mind control people or certainly influence people. And yeah, Ezreal also, magic boy running around shooting like laser beams out of his Shuriman gauntlet. Those things are not easily integrated, right? Like, they simply aren't. I don't know what the fuck they're gonna do. Probably they're gonna make Seraphine not a mage anymore, which I think is a waste. Like, I think it's very... like, Riot has screwed Seraphine up so fucking bad, and it's really fucking tedious and annoying. Zeri is just gonna get, like, she might get a thing of, like, oh, it's not magic, it's Hextech something something, she got caught in an explosion, got superhero powers. Like, she might be retconned into being more of a superhero rather than, like, a mage. And Ezreal, I think they'll just make him not a mage, and it's only the gauntlet that's magic. Which, again, like, bullshit, but, you know. But those are all challenges to the status quo, right? Like, and it's... it's very annoying. Is there a motif or style of character you'd be interested to see Riot and the League's lore team take on? Not right now. No. The way that Riot has treated its lore department, the way that, like, with firing 530 people, Jesus fucking Christ, I'm still mad about that. No, I'm not interested or excited about future champions right now, I'm afraid. Like, Hwei was fine. Like, I liked Briar as a concept, but Melio, Briar, Hwei, like, Riot has shown no interest in them, really, outside of products to sell. They have shown no interest in developing any kind of a narrative for any of the champions they've been releasing recently. Renata Glass was brilliant, but, like, are they ever going to do any fucking thing with her? I don't think so. I have no faith in them right now. None. Like, and that's the company, right? The corporation specifically. I have no faith the corporation, the company, gives a shit. I don't think Riot, the company, sees the point of doing any kind of storytelling about most of their champions. I think Riot sees the point in doing storytelling about whatever Arcane makes popular. Right? Like, I think they see a point in focusing on and pushing whatever becomes popular out of the Emmy Award-winning Netflix series, because that thing had prestige, that thing had cultural cachet, that thing got mainstream recognition, which is something that Riot is so desperately fucking slutty for, and horny, and desperate, in a way that's kind of sad, frankly, these days. And I think that'll be the focal point of what the fuck Riot even tries to do in the future, is like, everything's gonna be about finding the next thing that can be turned into Arcane, right? And a lot of champions are not that. A lot of champions simply aren't that. Most of the monsters, for example, are not that. Like, good luck that we'll see anything what the fuck soever that has to do with Shaco ever, for example, right? Like, the champions who are just so unpopular, like Rammus, is he gonna matter ever in anything that League of Legends does except as a meme character? No. Like, that's... So I'm despondent. I'm not excited to see Riot's take on anything much right now. Like, I wouldn't really sort of... Like, if I have a real cool concept for a character, I wouldn't want to throw it at the fucking poor motherfuckers at Riot, who will do their very... Like, the workers will do their very best, and they'll come up with something that's vaguely cool, and then it'll get shat out onto the Summoner's Rift, and then it'll never be heard from again, except in balance updates, or, like, there's a skin for it, right? Like, that's... Until the MMO actually sort of is on the horizon, I don't have any reason to have any excitement for anything, any story part of League of Legends that isn't Arcane. I'm really excited for Arcane Season 2. Of course I am. But outside of that, I don't see any reason to have any faith that Riot will do anything that's worthwhile for a good long time. Because they have declared their passionate disinterest in their own narrative universe. Because they're retconning the whole fucking thing out of existence because a TV show got popular, right? So, yeah. Any thoughts on Neil Cicierega music? Not really. When I listen to Neil Cicierega, or Cicierega, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. That's a running joke with him. I go no thoughts, head empty, just having a good time, enjoying myself. I really like his Christmas album, Now I Am Become Christmas. That's in my rotation all the time. Is this the first time that you've ever seen Aurora Borealis crush mankind? I love that song. Here's one from a deleted user. I don't know who you are, but I'll answer your question anyway. I feel it's one of the more common and fair criticisms of One Piece that the main cast got rather bloated, requiring all of the Straw Hats to travel together even when only 4 of them are actually going to do something in an arc. Time skip arcs kind of try to fix this by having the crew have for stuff like Dressrosa, but then immediately screws it up by reintroducing 60 new named randos who do not need to be there and just exist to add more pointless fights and take up panel space. Okay, so if you had to cut 3 members from the Straw Hat crew, who would it be? No. I mean, I fundamentally disagree with the premise of that criticism. I fundamentally disagree with the premise of that question. Like, I think that comes from a rather sort of save the cat Western screenplay adaptation style of story utilitarianism, which I don't really... It's the thing about genre, right? One Piece is, genre-wise, a number of things. It's a shonen battle manga. Like, it's structured very much around big fights with big villains, right? It's an adventure story, which is like, that's why the format of it is the Straw Hats get on a ship, go to an island. Oh shit, there's a big bad villain and it's doing bad stuff. Whatever, like, whether that's like Doflamingo or it's Kaido or it's like on Punk Hazard where it's Caesar Clown. There's a big villain who's doing bad things. Now the Straw Hats have to go and beat him up, and then they do that, and then like storylines resolve. happy farewells, everyone says goodbye, then we go to the next island and we sort of repeat the structure over and over again. That's what they've been doing for 25 years. And what it is outside of that is an epic. And I don't say that as like a praise for it. It's like, oh, it's epic, it's cool. I say it is an epic in the sense of that's the scope and scale of the story that's being told. It is something akin to the Odyssey. It is something akin to the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? It is this series of vignettes and interconnected stories about a specific cast of characters recurring over a series of not entirely interconnected, but certainly not disconnected adventures, right? Like, it's these... In the same way that Odysseus landing on the island of Polyphemus, right? And, like, fucking around with the Cyclops and getting half of his men eaten. And tricking the dude and stabbing him in the eye and pretending to be a sheep. And, like, who's hurting you? Well, no one is hurting. Like, doing the little trick with the name. That story doesn't fucking matter in the grand scheme of what's actually going on in the Odyssey, which is he's trying to get the fuck home, right? Like the objective of the story is that he needs to get home. So what the fuck is he doing fucking around with Polyphemus, right? What's he doing in half of the places with half of the things that he runs into? How do they matter? What do they have to do with the final goal? Well, fucking nothing, but the point of them is to be there because it is an epic, right? Like, it is this collection of stories that have been strung together to form something vaguely like an overarching narrative, right? Like, but with themes and ideas that run in all kinds of different directions, and which aren't like, and where you sort of get from like a Western Marvelized or like just a Western like Hollywood screenplay structure is this thing of like, no, like everything needs to flow together towards like one singular purpose. Like, you have the beginning, the middle, and the end. You have like a 3-act structure. You have the hero's journey. You have like all of these fairly rigid structures for streamlining and making a story more effective to be told in a more like concise and I wouldn't say simplified, but a more concise and like straightforward manner. And One Piece just isn't that. Like, this is one of the things that's a reasonable criticism of the live action adaptation, is that so many of the things that the live action adaptation has to cut, right? Like, it has to cut so many things. It has to leave out so many things. It has to elide so many things into each other. It has to make so many alterations to smooth out, to shorten, to like to remove digressions and extra little cul-de-sacs, to create a story which is more singular and cohesive, which presents like a singular flowing narrative, right? And it's good. Like, I like the live action adaptation because like that's its format, its genre requires those adaptations, but the manga format doesn't, right? So you say this thing of like Timeskip tries to fix this by having the crew halved for stuff like Dressrosa. No, it doesn't. The crew isn't halved for Dressrosa. Everyone is on their own, doing their own thing. Everyone is doing something important, right? Like the same thing in the Wano arc. Even though Luffy and the crew are separated a lot, everyone is off doing their own thing. Zoro has his whole thing with like Enma, like the swords, learning about like, a little bit about his own connection to the land of Wano, right? Like, there's characters like Usopp, Brook, Chopper, who don't often have a lot to do. Same thing with Nami. Her development is kind of stalled. Those are reasonable criticisms of the narrative, I think. But this idea that introducing 60 new named randos who do not need to be there, no, they do need to be there. Because without them, the world becomes so much more empty, and part of the point of the story of One Piece is that it's not just a story about the One Piece crew, like the Straw Hat crew, it's a story about the world. And it is necessary that the audience has a strong connection, not just to the Straw Hat crew, but to the people in the world, the people that the Straw Hats meet on their journey, because, like, the final enemy of this story, more than likely, is going to be Emu, right? Is going to be the despot who sits on the empty throne where he's not supposed to be, or they are not supposed to be. And the world government and the celestial dragons, like this oppressive structure that exists in the world that is pounding down on everyone who lives in it, that is oppressing every living soul that exists in the One Piece world, has to be broken down. It has to be destroyed by the sun god Nika, yes, but also by a world revolution, right? Like by the world revolutionaries. And that requires that the Straw Hats get into contact, not just with 5 or 6 powerful, very memorable individual dudes, but with hundreds, with thousands of people who will come to their call. Like when the Straw Hats say, hey, it's time to fucking go, the world government is going down, there needs to be a world ready to respond to that, right? There needs to be a whole world of people whose lives have been touched by the Straw Hats who are willing to say, well, the Straw Hats risked everything to help us, and the world government just forces us to be enslaved to the celestial dragons and sends buster calls whenever they fucking want. No, let's fucking go. Let's fucking have this out right now. That is necessary for the story that One Piece is trying to tell. So, like, this idea that 60 new name characters are randos that don't need to exist. No, they do need to exist. Because there need to be people who aren't Straw Hats, right? If the characters aren't named, they don't become people. Then they're just crowds. Then they're just NPCs, right? And that's something that a lot of shonen, I think, could fucking stand to learn from, because there are some shonen that just do not give a flying fuck about the worlds that their characters are fighting for, ostensibly. Jujutsu Kaisen. Bleach. Naruto did a good job with this, but like Bleach, Jujutsu Kaisen especially Jujutsu Kaisen. Holy fuck, does that story just... I have other criticisms of Jujutsu Kaisen as a whole thing, but yeah. So if I had to cut 3 members from the Straw Hat crew, no, is my answer to that. Nope. If you cut even one of them, it doesn't work. Even Chopper, like Chopper, who for the most part is quite useless. Usopp, who for the most part, like, well, no, Usopp gets to be God Usopp. Like, I think, like, I would argue that Usopp is one of the most thematically important characters in One Piece. Like, Brook, Jinbei, any of them, like, you can't cut them because they are all part of the fabric of that shit, right? And also, like, given the way that Oda works, like, we might have another 8 years, 9 years, 10 years to go before he actually finishes up. Please take breaks and holidays, Oda-san. Please do. Don't, like, you're working yourself to death, my man, and we need you around. Not just for One Piece, but because you are a person and you're valuable, and your body is valuable, and your life is valuable, and it's more important than this fucking story. Take some breaks. Anyway, I reject the premise of your question. Thank you for asking it, though. Phantasmal Wordsmith. I know there's been a mention there's only time for one MMO being a Final Fantasy XIV. Has there been any time sync games, though, that really stood out as something you'd want to look at, talk about? You're mentioning Warframe. I have had thoughts about trying to get into Destiny many times because, well, I know a couple of people who've worked on the lore of that thing, and it's fascinating. And also, Destiny seems like it has a really fucking solid fantasy sci-fi universe underpinning it. Like, it seems that it has some really solid, interesting ideas and characters in there. It's just in order to, well, first of all, a bunch of that content doesn't exist anymore, which is a problem for me trying to get into it. And also, the amount of time that I'd have to sink into trying to get through all of it at this point is daunting. So, like, I'm on the Final Fantasy XIV train at least until I finish Endwalker. Then we'll see about Dawn Trail, right? Like, we'll see how I feel about 14 by then. And then maybe I'll pick another big time sync game to be the stream game or whatever. But yeah, no, Warframe I don't have time for. But Destiny I have been side-eyeing. I've been looking at it. Great-Based Attorney. That's a good username. I believe you mentioned being a fan of the Fire Emblem series. Are there any characters you're particularly fond of, be it for gameplay, design, or personality? I like Tharja a lot. I'm sure I'm saying Tharja or whatever. Tarja, whatever. Fucking... I see that name and I instinctively sort of pronounce it in a vaguely Finnish way. Tharja. Tarja. Whatever. I like her a lot. I know that's stereotypical, but I find her adorable. Like, I find her very cute. I find her very silly and funny, notwithstanding her issues with consent and boundaries, right? Like, Awakening really was one of the better goddamn Fire Emblem games in terms of, like, just personality and character and, like, building a compelling central cast. I really like Frederick. Frederick is good. He's fun. He's a lovely man. Pick God and pray. What a line. I have a lot of fondness for, like, the main 3 in Three Houses. Edelgard in particular, I really fucking like her a lot. Right, like, she does need to realize that in order to abolish the system of nobility, the Empress has to go too. Be good if she figured that one. Like, she still has that possession of the... And, like, this is not a criticism of the character's writing. This is something that feels very, very true to her. Like, something that's a good part of her character. Is that for all of her ambitions of egalitarianism and equality, she cannot let go of the idea of herself as Empress, right? Which is something I wish the game engaged with a little bit more strongly than it does. Or at all. With, even a little bit with. It doesn't engage with it fucking at all, I think, which is a problem for the storytelling of that game, but I like her so much. I like Dimitri as well as, like, this, this hyper-traumatized little Catholic good golden boy, who just can't stop. Like, he's a social and political conservative, right? He believes in noblesse obligée. He believes in the necessity of the nobility and like, oh, we can't go too fast, too far. He's a conservative, but he's an interesting conservative character. Yeah. So, like, I really liked a lot of the characters in Three Houses, for example. Quite enjoyed those. Also, I have a fondness for Joshua from one of the GBA games. The Sacred Stones is the one it's called. I have some fondness for him. I quite liked his character. He was just fun, like the way that he's like a rake and a flirt, like a classic Prince in Disguise kind of character. I think they executed him quite well, even if those games had a pretty hard limit on how much personality they could really give the characters. Mass8705. Hello, Scan. Since you spent a good sum of time working on a shorts channel, I wanted to ask, which character design have you reviewed this year that stood out to you as the most inspired? Oh, you were asking me a favorites question. You can't... I'm sorry. You don't get an answer to a favorites question. I don't know how to pick favorites because... By what metric could I possibly rank these things? I do... Like, with recency bias in mind, Toy Terror Cho'Gath was a revelation of a character design. That one is that's a good recontextualization. Like, that's genuinely his best skin. That's a really, really, really solid way to reframe Cho'Gath as a character. I really like that character design a lot. The fuck else I've been looking at? Kyogre, right? Like, revisiting Gen 3, games like I did not play those games much. Myself when I was a kid. It was sort of in the period of my life when I was interested in Pokemon, but I didn't have access to any, like, handheld with which to play it. I was surprised revisiting Gen 3 just how much I fucking love Kyogre. Kyogre is such a good fucking design, like, in its base form, and especially in its primal form. Its primal form is so fucking cool. And genuinely, I think Kyogre is really well inspired as a character design. Like Orca, Goldfish, something vaguely slightly anthropomorphic about it, weird, and then like those very specific like geometric markings that just like they look like the work of human hands, and that sort of marks it out as something that is something other than simply a natural creature. Like, good fucking character design. Matrox, if you were to have your own Pokemon gym, what type would it be and what would your team of 6 be? I can show you that. This might take a second, so bear with me. Because I drew that some years ago now. When was that? In 2020? No, it was later than that. Or was it? Hang on. Ah, there it is. There it is. There's. Oh, that is not sized correctly to the screen. There we go. Hiker. I would be a hiker. And I would just have that, I think. Like, I would have, like, Golem because, you know, hiker. Gotta have it. I would have Lycanroc because I like Lycanroc. I would have Boxtopus. That's what it's called, right? No, it's not. That's from Legends of Runeterra. What the fuck is it called? The octopus thing. I can't remember its name. I would have Lucario because, of course, I would. I would have a Mudsdale. And I would have an Archeops. The bird thing, because it's a rock bird, but rock type, but it's also flying. It can use rock moves and fly at the same time, which gives me a little bit of a type spread. It's not meant to be an efficient or effective team, especially, but that's the team I would have. That would be my team of 6. Now I need to remove that from my scene. There we go. Slurp, slurp, slurp. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Hey, Sky, I hope your day's been good. I remember you talking about pivoting to fighting game content. Oh, well, pivoting is maybe too strong of a word, but investing in it, getting interested in it, looking at it, sure, absolutely. Once the League fighting game comes out, is that in the works or a long-term plan? It's a long-term plan. Like I said, not until the League fighting game comes out, because that is the thing about, like, when you want to try and investigate a new space on YouTube, it's that thing of you get punished for fucking around with the algorithm. The League of Legends fighting game is going to be a thing that, like, draws attention from both League of Legends players and fighting game players, which means if I become if I have something interesting to say, if I can make good content about the League fighting game, that will make my channel sort of attract an audience of fighting game players who I can then serve with, like, maybe I can do some Street Fighter content. Like, I really do want to talk about some of the characters on Street Fighter 6, for example. Guilty Gear is like a valid line of inquiry. Like, I wouldn't mind doing some What's the Deal videos about Street Fighter characters, for example, because they're so iconic and they've been around so long. What's the Deal with Bridget seems like a good idea for a video to do at some point eventually. And, like, maybe I'll get around to doing some of that before 2XKO comes out. But 2XKO will be like a great... Like, that's a natural point of where Riot themselves sort of provide the context that creates contact between those two content spaces, and I can sort of ride that in order to broaden the appeal of my channel, right? Like, and broaden the base of viewers that my channel will draw upon, which is something I do want to do, because I am... I'm tired of being a League of Legends YouTuber. I really am. Like, I've said this before, and I'm taking a slow route towards sort of disentangling my YouTube channel from the stranglehold of League of Legends. And it's gonna cost me, and it's gonna take a long time, and it's gonna be difficult to do that, but I'm gonna do it, and take the hit for it. Not in the sense that I'll never make videos about League of Legends content ever again. It's still... Like, I still fucking love those champions. I love those characters. As cynical as I become, I love them. I adore them. There's so much good there. Nasus and Renekton are such good brothers. In the little bits and snippets of them that we get to see outside of Renekton just being angry and Nasus being, I am the curator of the sands, blah, wisdom, blah, blah. What the fuck was I talking about? Right, so, yes, it's a long-term plan for me to phase towards other content spaces. I want to move my channel more towards being a variety video essay channel, right? Like, about various gaming subjects, but not really confined to just like one IP or property. That's the long-term plan. So it'll take a while. It will take a while. But I have plans, like a million plans in the back of my head. And once I am on my ADHD medication, I'm sure those plans will start to coalesce a little bit more into coherent action than they are right now. Rain for Cats. A few months ago, on a Q&A, you recommended the incredible NSFW webcomic Alfie by Inkay. Is there any other similar webcomics you want to recommend right now? I mean, there's Oglaf, of course, which is like sort of sex comedy more than anything. It's like comic strips that are like individualized jokes with no real long-running storyline in them. If you're looking specifically for something which is like fun and pornographic, it's not a webcomic, but it's a comic by a manga artist called Isutoshi called Slut Girl in English, I think it's called. It has some of the best, there's some lovely sort of late 90s comedic artwork. It's very hot as well. Problematic themes in there, as you might, like, it's a hentai manga, so of course there are, right? Like, it has some troubling instances of consent things and, you know, which you have to be ready for. But it's also really charming. It has some fun characters. Like, it's mostly comedy themed, but it has some genuinely good comedy, like some genuinely fucking funny comedy. And just a little bit of an interesting story there, a little bit of character, a little bit of, you know, something. Beyond just, like, porn tropes, right? So, like, that, if you're looking for something like that. Or, there's the webcomic I Roved Out in Search of Truth and Justice. Is that what it is? Hang on. Yeah, Truth and Love. I Roved Out in Search of Truth and Love. It's called irovedout.com, which is very much like a fantasy porn webcomic, with, like, a really oddly sort of impressionistic style to it. Like, very high-quality artwork. Extremely well done and well made, but also kind of weird and floaty and dreamlike, and odd in the connections that it draws in its narrative and where it goes. And very queer. Like, boy howdy, lots of lesbians in that one. So if that's your bag, absolutely. You can look into that. Mirrors. Glad to see you doing shorts about Sonic character designs. How do you feel about Shadow the Hedgehog's identity past Sonic Adventure 2, namely in Heroes and Shadow? I don't really know enough about Sonic to have an opinion on that very much. Like, what I know of Shadow is that I had a girlfriend who played through Sonic Adventure 2 while I looked on. And I saw the story that way. That's the extent of my knowledge of Shadow. I think maybe also she played through Sonic Adventure 1 with me. Maybe. It's a long time ago, I don't remember. So, like, all I really know about Shadow is, like, Maria, I'm broody, and I'm the evil Sonic, but then I redeem myself, and I'm a hero, by sacrificing myself. And then, of course, all the memes about how Shadow got a gun, and then he started shooting people. So, like, whatever deeper characterization that exists for Shadow, I only know of him what I absorb through memes, frankly. I think he's more of a Vegeta now, like the sort of slightly edgier counterpart to the main hero, but like never actually really evil in any meaningful way. And I don't fucking know. Like, I don't know. I don't think he was a very good character to start with. Because he was just like, what if Sonic the Hedgehog had an evil counterpart? Which is like, so stock, like so tropey, like especially in Sonic the Hedgehog, where he already fucking has Metal Sonic, which is like exactly that fucking thing, but in a different flavor. And it's like, yeah, I don't think so. I don't know. And like they tried to do the same thing again with Silver, right? Like where he was like, no, that's not even really. No, I don't know enough about Silver to make that connection, but yeah, like I was never invested in Shadow. I don't really care that much about his lore or story because I've never investigated it. Like maybe if I played through the fucking Sonic games and sort of like looked deeply into his character, and maybe I'd find something there, but it's just outside of my wheelhouse. You'd have to ask a Sonic fan. Game Ahmad, random question because I've been craving for pinball tables recently, but is there any one pinball table or game that's caught your attention the most? Huh. I've never really engaged with pinball very much. Like, when I think of pinball, I think of, like, occasionally when my family would go on vacation to, like little vacation resort places, various places like France, Italy, like road trip all the way down there, be in, like, a little mobile home for like, a week at a place with a nice pool and some nice weather and go see a town or something. Usually those places would have arcades, right? Like, they have arcades. I would play a fuck ton of Metal Slug on those things with whatever money I would be allowed for video gaming while I was there. And occasionally I play a little bit of pinball, and I think there was a Addams Family table that I got a little bit into on one vacation. I think it was Addams Family. I'm pretty sure. Because I figured out, like, some of the things you had to do to gain points. Like, I figured out how to actually shoot the ball into some of the specific places to light up, like, the symbols and the numbers to make the combo happen and shit like that. So, like, those are most of my pinball memories, are, like, this thing that I saw in an arcade while out on a holiday in some, like touristy resort place. But without any chance to really engage deeply with it. So I don't have a lot of pinball opinions. Zcar, hello, Skyboy. Hang on, how dare you? I'm a Sky man. What's your vision for Riot's MMO? Like, with the limited information you have now, what do you believe Riot will do? Yeah, that's a good question, because they started over, right? Ghostcrawler was there. He seemed to have had a specific vision for the MMO that he was pushing towards working on. Then Ghostcrawler left. And reading between the lines, like, I don't know that specifically because Ghostcrawler left or whatever, but, like, reading between the lines, there was a big changeover in the internal staff there that sort of coincided with some, like, presumably with some kind of disagreement about the direction and the point of the function of what the MMO is and what it should be. And what it sounds like, reading between the lines on Mark Merrill's letter, fuck that guy, that's not because of the letter, that's because of other reasons. It sounds like what they were working on was a very standard MMO, right? Like that seemed to have been like that. I would imagine that was part of the point of assigning Ghostcrawler to the thing, is that he made World of Warcraft, and Riot wanted its own World of Warcraft, right? Like they sort of had this idea: we'll make a fantasy MMO set in the League of Legends universe like the players have been asking for like 15 years now, right? Of just having an MMO, being able to be in the world, like be your own character, hang out, see the champions, shit like that. It sounds like that was what they were working on, more or less. And now with whatever changeover, with whatever internal crisis, like with the firing of the 530 fucking people, Jesus fucking Christ, I'm still mad about that. There's been some kind of shift where the way that Riot themselves are spinning it, internally and externally, is that, oh, we want to pivot towards something more innovative, something more different, something more special, rather than just a normal MMO, like just an MMO by the numbers, right? Which, on the one hand, it's one of the things I do respect about Riot as a company, is that they have historically been willing to say, no, this is not good enough. We have invested millions of dollars in it, and it's not good enough. We are not going to release it. Like, I do respect that from them as a company, that they have the capacity and the willingness to say no, right? Like to say, this isn't good enough. They did it with Legends of Runeterra. Like, Legends of Runeterra got rebooted like a couple of times before it came to the form that it's in, which is excellent. Like, it's a very good game, even if it's not making the money that Riot wanted it to make. So I do respect them for that, and I do respect their commitment to, like, wanting to make something that is truly special every time. It's also one of the biggest fucking albatrosses around their fucking neck when it comes to, like, it's one of the reasons why they're so shit at doing their own lore, right? Is that they are so masturbatorily obsessed with doing something special every time, and if you can't do something special, don't do it at all, which is a horrible attitude to have when it comes to, like, maintaining a narrative universe. I think is sometimes you just gotta do the journeyman work. Sometimes you just gotta do, like, the maintenance and, like, of I won't say shitting something out, but, like, putting something out, right? Like, letting people spend time with characters, even if it's not special, even if it's not an event, even if it doesn't shatter the world or upend the level of quality or, like, whatever. Like, even if it's not a big deal, sometimes it's okay to have some shit that's just a little deal, right? And that's something Riot is fucking bad at. With the MMO, probably a good choice to insist on it being special. And so, like, I don't really know what they have in the works. Like, I have to imagine that the final form it will take is that of an MMO, right? Like, there's an extent to which they probably cannot and will not redefine the genre, because that's not really what Riot does, right? Like, Riot, historically speaking, is not the company that invents a whole new genre of game. It's the company that, like, looks at the available genres and says, we'll take that one, and then they just do the shit out of that thing until they completely dominate the space. They did that with League of Legends. Like, that owns the MMO space. I'm sorry, Dota 2, but it does. It owns the MMO space. It is the premier MMO. It just simply is. It is the premier esport, right? They did it with esport. They didn't invent that shit. That was StarCraft. That was Blizzard, like, laid the foundation and the groundwork for what esports is. And then Riot swoops in and says, okay, we'll steal all of that, and then we'll do it even fucking harder, and then we'll take over the whole thing. Which they, depending on the way you read the thing, like, I think they fairly successfully managed to become, like, the premier esport, despite Blizzard's attempts to the contrary. RIP Overwatch League, you piece of shit. And by the way, Overwatch League was fine. Overwatch League was occasionally good. I had a lot of fun watching it sometimes, but Bobby Kotick used it as an excuse to ruin the whole entire fucking game, so, you know, fuck it. What was I talking about? Right. I don't think Riot will, like, deliver a revolutionary new take on a completely unseen style of MMO that has never existed before. I think it'll be an MMO. I think you'll have ability rotations. I think you'll pick a class. I think you'll level up. I think you'll have to do, like, your crafting skills. Like, I think all of the MMO stuff will be there. But I am not sure anymore that it will be a Runeterra MMO. I'm not sure anymore that it'll be that. I think there's a pretty solid chance, again, reading between the lines, Riot announcing the one Runeterra project, everything's gonna be retconned to fit with Arcane. I think there's a non-zero chance that what we're getting is essentially Arcane, the MMO. I think there's a non-zero chance that what they're working towards, and part of the reason why the lore has been in such a fucking limbo, is what they're working towards is trying to set up for an MMO that is set in the Arcane version of the League of Legends universe. Not necessarily in Piltover and Zaun exclusively, like, not necessarily that you're going to be running around with Arcane characters, but maybe, like, 20 years in the future, maybe 100 years, like, who knows what the fuck happens in Season 2, right? Like, that set some non-specific time in the past or future of the Arcane storyline, but takes place in that version of the Runeterra universe. If I were to take a pie-in-the-sky guess on what the fuck is happening behind the scenes, I think that's what they're doing. I think they're pivoting the whole thing to fit the one Runeterra project and to capitalize on, like, Riot's newest hyperfixation with, we have one thing that got popular and now that's the basis for everything we do, with Arcane. That would be my best guess at what's happening in there. Arno, the Blind Stargazer, when you inevitably play Demon's Souls, hopefully in the next decade, yeah, I mean, fuck, like, probably might not be until 2030, who knows. I need to get through Dark Souls 3 first. Will you play the remake or try the original? I think the original would be better for a boss design series, as the new version seems to ignore a lot of meaning and design choices featured in it. The YouTuber Ratatoskr has a spoiler-heavy video on the problems of the remake. Well, I can't watch that, obviously. Well, it depends. Like, I have tried to emulate the original Demon's Souls before on my PC. It didn't go so well. But by the time, like, I don't know. Like, I really can't answer that. I don't know what I'll do. Like, the obvious thing is to play the remake, because that's available and easy to play. Whereas the original Demon's Souls just has never been re-released in any meaningful way that I'm aware of. So, I don't know. Like, I'd have to look into it. So I can't really answer that question. I'm sorry. Zcar, will you watch One Punch Man Season 3 when it comes out? Probably not. I don't know. I don't know. Because even when Season 1 was coming out, which was amazing, I still preferred the manga. Because the manga is already, like, sometimes just becomes an anime for, like, 14 panels where they just draw them like they're fucking trying to animate the sequence. And, like, part of what attracts me to One Punch Man, partly it's the story by One, right? Like, One's fantastic ability to do storytelling and comedy, which I get mostly through the webcomic. And then there's, like, Murata's god-tier fucking artwork. That fucking man and his assistants. God damn him. They are so astonishingly good. And, like, the anime sort of... It can't really get there. Like, the anime has been and can be astonishingly gorgeous, right? But it can't get to where the artwork goes. It just can't. Like, it just... Because it's different formats, like, because the genres are different, because Murata is working within single panels, single pages on which he can spend, like, 30 hours if that's what it takes to create the amazing fucking set of panels that he wants to do, can't do that with anime of any kind of seasonality, right? So yeah, like, I don't know that I don't know. Like, Season 2 was a big disappointment, right? Obviously. They tried their best, bless their hearts, but they couldn't live up to what Season 1 was. And I don't know what the point for me would be for Season 3. Like, for me, specifically, personally, to watch it, I don't think I'd get out of it what I wanted. I really don't think so. So I don't have any plans to, but maybe a trailer will drop and make me excited. I don't know. What tunes are you listening to lately? Oh, I've been listening to the Has Been Hotel soundtrack. You know, no surprise there, because that's been on my mind much. Been listening to a Danish band called TV To, which is like an old classic rock band in Denmark with like some music that's like genuinely fantastic. I've been re-listening to some old Robbie Williams albums as well. Olivia Rodrigo, her new album Guts has been in my playlist rotation. I really like the song Vampire a lot, not because it's like it's clunky. And it's not, the lyrics are not very well written, but there's just something about the energy that really fucking gets me. I have been listening back to the Beetlejuice musical again, which I had a brief sort of fixation with for a little while. It's some of the songs from it that I still absolutely love, like Dead Mom, for example. I think it's fantastic. Janelle Monáe's Dirty Computer has been in, I'm just looking at my playlist here, has been in my rotation. I've been listening to some Hozier, or however the fuck you pronounce his name. There's some ABBA in my playlist as well that's been sort of cropping up. I got into Creedence Clearwater Revival a little bit recently, which I've been sort of micro-dosing in between other things. Oh yeah, and Tim Christensen. He's a Danish rock musician who's like been playing fucking forever. He has a few good albums. Like I've been listening to Superior a bunch, his old album Superior. And also, there's a band called Sidecar Astronauts. Well, there isn't a band called Sidecar Astronauts. It's a side project by a guy called... What the fuck is his real name? Storm. I know him as half of the comedy duo Paul and Storm, who sort of toured a lot with Jonathan Colton back in the day. And Severino, I think is his last name. He did a little side project by himself called Sidecar Astronauts, which has a couple of songs on it that I really fucking like. There's one of them called Nazi Puncher, for example, which I'm quite fond of. Back in My Arms is a good song from that album. It's called Play Again, Sidecar Astronauts. Yeah, Back in My Arms, Nazi Puncher, Too Much Love is pretty decent also, I think. So if you want to listen to some really niche specific 2018 indie American dad rock, I guess you would classify it as, then that's certainly available for you. What else do I got here? Oh yeah, the Blue Van, another Danish rock band that I really, really like. They have an album called Man Up, which I would recommend to anyone who loves fucking hard, like rock music that goes hard. Listen to Man Up. Man Up is fucking fantastic. It's an absolute fucking banger of an album. Anything else? But Ghost. Ghost made their way onto my playlist. I watched a video essay by Laura Crone, who also ended up getting into Ghost kind of on accident, and that sort of convinced me to give it a listen. Hunter's Moon. I think it was a song that was made for like a horror movie franchise, some big horror movie franchise thing. But it's like, that's a fucking Bloodborne ass song. Hunter's Moon, that's a fucking Bloodborne ass song. And I listen to it and I just hear Bloodborne happening see Bloodborne happening in my head. Listening to Incubus, which is a prog rock band from back in the 2000s. That they still put out albums every once in a while. They've gone much more sort of avant-garde and a little bit weird with it later in their career. Early on, they were like an acid rock band. They became sort of a prog rock with a couple of mainstream hits. And now, sort of more recent times, they've become sort of a weird mix between like hard rock, pop fusion, various forms of impressionistic weird rocks. I don't really know the genres, but I quite like them. Anything else that's worth mentioning? No, I tried to get into the Mountain Goats recently. I've been listening to No Children. I've been listening to Tennessee, or not Tennessee, Tallahassee, the album Tallahassee. I haven't really been able to spread out beyond that. I've been listening to Poor Man's Poison, which I think are quite nice for a little folk band. But yeah, I don't think there's anything else really notable on my playlists to mention from there. Oh shit, I accidentally skipped a question there. Then there's Beetroot. Have you played Disco Elysium? Nope. Not yet. I will someday, but not yet. Alternative question, any interesting books you're reading at the moment? Yes! There's a book. I need my Kindle. My Kindle app, specifically. Hang on. It's called Perfect Me, and it's by an author who is called... It's called Perfect Me, Beauty as an Ethical Ideal. It's not fiction. It's by Heather Widdows. And it deals with, like, as the subtitle says, beauty as an ethical ideal. Like, the way that we assign ethical value, beyond just aesthetic value, ethical value to the concept of beauty. And the ways in which that like, fucking poisons our brains. And then the ways in which that warps our interactions in society, right? Like, in the obvious ways, which is like ugly people are more likely to be convicted of crimes regardless of whether they're guilty of them, and like beautiful people are less likely to be convicted of crimes regardless of whether they did them. And the ways in which beauty intersects with wealth, right? Like if you are wealthy, you're more likely to be beautiful because you can afford all the products, all the services, all the accoutrements, all the material goods that are required to make a person beautiful, all the beautiful clothes, all the makeup, all the personal trainers, all the reconstructive facial surgery, like all of that shit. It's a really interesting book. I'm not that far in it yet. I think it has some problems with its argumentation that I haven't quite worked out in my head yet. I want to read some criticism of it as well. But I've been having a good time. Like that's a really fascinating, interesting, especially from the perspective of like assessing character design. So that one's been in my head. So, now, Varia the Tired Villain asks, now that all the Riot Forge games you've been waiting for since their announcements are out, except for the unnamed and not shown Shuriman one, which, yeah, I'm more on that one, and you've completed them, what are your thoughts overall on them as a project? Which ones you've enjoyed best or feel like best? Yeah, my overall thoughts is I wanted more. My overall thoughts is that this was not nearly enough to accurately assess Riot Forge as a project. Because they barely got off the fucking ground with anything here. When you really sit down and look at it. They did one big story-driven RPG, right? Which was The Ruined King, which was great, but which was really fucking hampered by being a continuation of the Ruined King story. Like, that was very cool for, like, big event thing. They wanted to do a huge thing of, like, oh, here's Viego, here's Gwen, here's, like, this big narrative event thing, which they then fucked the fuck up with the Sentinels of Light bullshit, which... I've covered that extensively in the past. And then they wanted the Ruined King game to be like, oh, this is the thing that like ties into it. Like, this is the prequel to the big Ruination event. But then, because game development doesn't work that way, the RPG, like that game took longer to finish than they thought. So that had to come out like way after the Ruination event was already over, which first of all took some fucking wind out of its sails. And then, because the game, The Ruined King, is like this prequel to a very specific in-game League of Legends video game event, that just like, the audience for that game just got sliced in fucking half, right? Like, because this is a game that says, hey, play this game if you want to know the prequel to the in-game event that everyone hated, right? Like, Sentinels of Light was not well liked. It didn't get a bunch of good press, certainly not from fucking me. And so, like, as a pitch to someone who's not into League of Legends already, right? Like, think about that. Trying to pitch Ruined King as a game that someone should play if they are not already a hardcore League of Legends lore fan. How would you convince them to do that? Because that game is so up its own ass about the League of Legends lore. That's something I love about it. That's something that made it really enjoyable for me as someone who is equally far up into the asshole of League of Legends lore, right? Like, I am the guy that this game is for, and I enjoyed it very much. But someone who's like, I've never been interested in League of Legends, but I like playing story-driven RPGs. Oh, hey, a story-driven RPG set in the League of Legends universe. Maybe I'll check it out. Oh, this is about, like, 15 concurrently running, already in progress storylines with a bunch of characters and cameos showing up that I don't understand, but the game is treating them like they're special and like they matter, and like I should be excited to see these characters that I've never met before in my life. Like, it's, as a pitch to the kinds of people who would play story-driven narrative RPGs, it was... I don't think it was a good idea from that lens. Like, again, this would have been fine if the Ruined King game had been one of like a half dozen RPGs that Riot would put out under the Forge label, where some of them are directed at like hardcore League of Legends fans, people who are super into the game already, and then some of them are directed outwards towards new players, new people, new people of like new interest. Same problem with the Mage Seeker, right? Like, it's a great fucking game. I really like it. I really had a good time with Mage Seeker. I think it was a very good game. I think it did some really interesting things with Silas's character, but also it is like halfway up the asshole of the Demacian Mage Seeker storyline, right? Like, it's comes on the heels of the Lux comic. Explicitly, it is a follow-up to the plot of the comic for Lux, and the comic for Lux didn't explain what the fuck Demacia is either, right? Like, that comic also was directed at hardcore League of Legends heads already, people who are already into the narrative universe, and didn't really fucking explain itself very well at all, or do a lot of world building for these characters. Like, that's something that the Marvel comics in general had a problem with. The Ash comic, I think, did by far the best on that one. And it's like, yeah, I liked it a lot, but I could not possibly recommend this game to someone who isn't into League of Legends. I couldn't, because, like, how are you supposed to give a shit about anything that happens here? Like, how is it supposed to matter to you when Morgana shows up as the Veiled Lady? Right? That doesn't mean anything to you. That's not significant. That doesn't matter. Like, the concept of the Veiled Lady, the concept of Morgana, it's like, that has weight to someone who knows the lore, but to someone who doesn't, she's just some random fucking lady with wings, and we don't know what the fuck, why the fuck to give a shit about her, or why, like, her connection with Kayle matters and the connection to the deep lore of Demacia. And that's sort of the problem with Riot Forge as a thing, is that they constantly made games for League of Legends fans, and then Riot turned around and was like, we can't believe that these games underperformed. We were expecting them to do much better in the market. Riot Forge has not done very well for, like, earning back its money. It's like, yeah, no shit, the fuck it. Like, yeah, because most League of Legends fans, most of the people who are into League of Legends enough to know the lore and the story, want to play League of Legends, and they play that game to the at the expense of almost fucking everything else because they get addicted to it. Like, people who play League of Legends want to play League of Legends. Broadly speaking, they play other games, sure, but the main thing they want from League of Legends is League of Legends, right? They're not gonna go play fucking Bantle City, Yordle Tale, whatever. They're not gonna go play the Mage Seeker, most likely. Like, it got some wind off of being similar enough to Hades, right? But they're not gonna go play the Ruined King game, because that's when they're there for the hardcore competitive multiplayer of League of Legends. Like, that's, yeah, of course, like, if you make these niche genre games directed at primarily at an audience whose primary interest is a hardcore, highly competitive MOBA, no shit they don't do so well. Like, my real frustration is that Riot Forge just simply it looked so much inward. And, like, again, Riot is a data-driven company, right? Like, it's a data-driven company. They are players first, and I know that the people at Riot Forge were really concerned about serving the players of League of Legends first, right? Like, and that's an admirable instinct. And it's one that I thought also, I'm not going to front here, I thought also at first that was going to work, right? I thought also at first, yeah, that makes sense. Like go for the players that you have, try to convert them into, like, these other things, like, use that to explore the story more for the players who are already into League of Legends. But in hindsight, I think it was a big mistake. I think they should have done games for people who don't give a shit about League of Legends more. And it's, again, it comes down to Riot Forge didn't get to do shit. They got to do, like, 4 games, right? Like, they got, what was it? Like, Hextech Mania thing, which was the rhythm game, which, like, okay, cool. Mage Seeker, Convergence. God, Convergence is another game that just does not address anyone who isn't League of Legends fans already. Ruined King, Song of Noon. Like, it ended up being 5 games, I guess, right? Yeah. And that's not enough. Like, that simply isn't fucking enough. And Riot did the thing that we talked about that they always do, which is like, well, it has to be big. It has to be big and special, and it has to be the biggest specialist, biggest thing. And we have to, like, and they did that with Ruined King especially. Like, it has to be the biggest specialist, big special, big thing. And it needs to set the world on fire, and it needs to be a revolution, and it needs to be exciting, and it needs to be cool 100 million% of the time. And everyone needs to love it, and it needs to be a big success, otherwise it wasn't worth doing. And then they put out a bunch of indie games for niche audiences that didn't set the world on fire, and Riot management went, well, that was not worth it then. That wasn't worth the money. That wasn't worth the time. Like, that didn't set the world on fire. They didn't change the publishing industry. We didn't become a big indie publisher overnight. That's not worth it. Fuck you. We're firing 530 fucking people, destroying Riot Forge, and you don't never get to do anything like this ever again. Like, fuck it. But yeah, like, in terms of the mistake that Riot Forge made, I think it didn't address audiences outside of League of Legends well enough, right? Like, I cannot really in good faith recommend any of the Riot Forge games to anyone who doesn't give a shit about League of Legends lore already, because you kind of have to in order for those games to be good to the maximum of their potential. They are not good entry points into the lore of League of Legends at all. Like, I really don't think so. And, like, the bigger problem beyond that is that Riot Forge took the knees out from under Riot Forge. Like, Riot Games took the knees out from under Riot Forge. They canceled the whole goddamn thing before Riot Forge even had a chance to try to do that thing I said they should do. Before they even had a chance to try and make games. Like, to pivot from, like I said, I thought at first also that Riot Forge would work on its own premise. That, like, we make games for League of Legends fans, directed at League of Legends fans in other genres, and that'll be our starting point. I thought that was going to work. In hindsight, I don't think it's going to work. But Riot Forge doesn't get to try and take advantage of that hindsight. They don't get to start to go, okay, this initial wave of games didn't do quite what we wanted it to do. Let's pivot to another strategy. Let's try something else. They don't get to do that because Riot just fucking shit-canned the whole thing before it had the chance to pivot, before it had the chance to become something, to be something, right? And that's bitter. I was hoping, because, like, I was quite comfortable giving some of the games bad reviews, like putting up my Convergence is a bad League of Legends story video, because I thought it was bad as a story in the League of Legends universe, because it was so fucking all over the place with the characterization of these characters. I was very comfortable doing that because I thought, well, they're gonna keep going, right? Like, they're gonna do at least 10 of these, surely. Like, they're not gonna just fucking cancel everything like that. And I should have known better. Like, I should not have trusted that they would stick with it. I shouldn't have trusted that, because they didn't. And now I'm sort of sitting here wishing, like, fuck, I wish I'd juiced those games up more. I wish I'd hyped them more. I don't know that it would have made a difference. But, like, I wanted Riot Forge to keep going. For years. For years and years and years, I wanted it to keep going. And try all kinds of things. and do all kinds of things. And Riot just said, it didn't get 5,000 billion% return on investment immediately, so fuck you, and 500 people are fired. And yeah, fuck Riot Games, the company, fuck the corporation, fuck every single CEO, that fucking wretched hive of scum and villainy. Assholes, bastards, the lot of them. Anyway, 3 League music-related questions. What is your opinion regarding the promotion of Heartsteel compared to previous bands' promotion? Yeah, Heartsteel... It feels like internally at Riot, they're... Like, it feels like the people who made Heartsteel, the people who pushed for it, the people who campaigned for it, who championed it, believed in it really, really, really fucking hard. It feels like the company, the corporation Riot, much in the way that they were with KDA, they didn't believe in KDA at all. To start with, like that project got so much fucking internal pushback from people who did not believe that possibly a K-pop themed skin line with a single couldn't possibly work. And then it worked, and then everyone was eager to claim credit for it, right? Heartsteel feels like much the same way, like this thing of like a League boy band, who gives a shit about a boy band? No one cares about a boy band. And it didn't get that much budget or promotion. Like that shared splash art is one of the things I'll point to as evidence of that. It didn't get that much of a push. It didn't get that much support. Depending on how Riot assesses the success of Heartsteel, maybe like the next go around, if it gets a next go around, they'll push harder. Like they'll put more resources behind it. But it felt like a project that someone people internally at Riot, it feels like a project someone had to fucking fight to get out. Like really had to fucking fight a bitter war to make that happen in the world. Mostly on the strength of like KDA was a success once upon a time. Surely we can replicate it, right? Like it felt like someone really had to push and fight for that to get out, while Riot Games, the company, took a conservative approach to like, okay, we'll put it out, but we're not going to waste too much money on it, kind of thing. And like then of course, you know, that colors the reception of the thing. We'll see. Like we'll see. I don't know what the long-term plans for Heartsteel is. I hope they come back. If you had to design a virtual band for League, what would it be and who would be in it? I mean, I would be interested in, like, let Jin put out an album of, like, experimental jazz fusion and, like, weird orchestral compositions, like highly expression. Like, let him put out a cover of, what's it called? 439 or whatever? Yeah, John Cage's 433, right? Like, let Jin be a musician, and let him just do fucking weird shit. Like, real fucking avant-garde weird shit. That would be cool. And like a bunch of it. Like, have him put out, like, 6 or 7 albums with no promotion or anything. Like, no, don't put up an advertising campaign for it. Like, just find some really weird fucking modernist composers doing real weird fucking shit. And commission them for a bunch of music, put it out as like 4 Jin albums, of course. 4 Jin albums, each of them with like 4 songs on them, where some of them where every single song is like 4 minutes and 44 seconds or whatever, and they're just fucking weird. Don't promote it, don't put a bunch of PR behind it, don't do a lot of shit, just put them out and let them exist. And when anyone asks, if anyone ever asks someone at Riot, hey, what is this thing? Why did you put that out? They go, oh, we didn't do that. Like, just disavow it. Like release it to the public domain, disavow it, pretend like it has nothing to do with you. That, I think, would be interesting and fun. Riot would never do something so interesting or creative, but, you know, a boy can dream. That's 3. Any thoughts on the TFT exclusive music skins? Not really. Not off the top of my head, anyway. I didn't like Virtuoso Jin very much. I don't like the way that his mask is integrated into that skin. I don't like he's doing the Mozart thing, and it kind of doesn't work for me. But nothing outside of that. Kay, I've been wondering, since you cover a lot of character designs for a lot of series as a whole, do you know why a lot of developers of fantasy games like Elden Ring or Final Fantasy XIV tend to shy away from having bi-POC and POC characters, or a lack of strong character customization in that aspect? I mean, oh boy, if you're talking about you seem to be talking about Japanese developers when you're talking about From Software and Final Fantasy, right? And one of the aspects is racism. Like, boy, so much racism. I don't know about, like, I don't know the internals of how FromSoft handles it, but, like, Final Fantasy XIV and its producer has had, like, some public, problematic statements as it regards, like racial representation within the scope of their narrative. And that's not new, and it's, like, Japan has a severe fucking problem with racism. Like, it's something we don't tend to think about a lot when we sit here in the West, is that Japan is a far-right country. It's a far-right, very reactionary, very conservative country, politically speaking. Inside of Japan, things are very, very complicated. Obviously, there are places and parts of Japan that are incredibly progressive, that are incredibly diverse, that are incredibly, like wild and out there and fun and like... But as a country, as a political entity in the world, Japan is reactionary, it is right-wing, it is extremely xenophobic, and it has a huge fucking racism problem. Like, a huge one. Like, even, like, within its own borders, like, within, like, Japan likes to imagine itself as this essentially mono-racial ethno-state, and it isn't. Like, it objectively just isn't. There are ethnic groupings within Japan that are not treated as such, that are refused recognition as ethnic groupings, and sort of like forcibly assimilated into the concept of the Yamato people as like a singular racial ethnic group. And it's like, it's a whole fucking thing. It's much more complicated than I'm even letting on here. It's not a subject I'm an expert on, I just know a little bit. And it's like, that's part of it, is that the way that Japanese culture approaches the value of like racial and gender diversity and things like that is just not the same as the ways that we do it here in the West, right? In some ways, they are more progressive and more advanced. Like, there are some parts of how Japan handles queerness and transness that are, like, frankly, in some ways better than we do it here in the West. And then there are ways in which it is much worse, right? It's complicated. It's very complicated. I can't give you a singular answer. But for Final Fantasy XIV, like, a big part of the reason why that game has the racial politics that it does is because, like, Yoshida is like some of the people who work on that game, some of the people who write that game are a little bit racist. It's an uncomfortable thing, but it's a thing. And, like, that's where you get, like, right-wing gamer chuds being like, oh yeah, Japan is, like, they're so anti-woke, and they don't give in to the wokest censorship, pandering, feminist, the LGBT, the Japan are so awesome because they're not woke. And it's like, no, buddy, pal, you little child, foolish little mortal, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. It's more complicated than that, dipshit. But, like, what is true is that Japan, in many ways, has a culture that is right-wing and reactionary. Like, that, you saw perhaps the whole fucking kerfuffle about, like, whether Attack on Titan is fascist, and, like, it absolutely has fascist themes. It absolutely has fascist ideas in it. Like, that is just part of the thing, and part of why that is because it's drawing from a lot of fascist imagery. Like, it's drawing from like, very old right-wing reactionary aesthetics and glorifications and ways of thinking about history. And, like, that's just a thing, right? Right, and there's also, like, sometimes if you come from a place that is very racially homogenous and you just don't have exposure to a lot of other different ways of being, like, having a racially diverse cast is just not going to be on your mind, right? Like, it's not, when you're publishing something specifically from your perspective, consumption within your, like, very monotone racial ethnic group, the concept of including other people is perhaps going to be a surprise to you. Like, and then you publish it outside of Japan, and all of a sudden people go, hey, what's with this thing? Why isn't that there? Like, they have these expectations that you're not ready for, and sometimes that can blindside a developer. Like, that has happened many, many times to Japanese games, that they get, like, localized or exported to the West, and all of a sudden there's a lot of criticism and a lot of cultural perspectives on those games that the developers weren't ready for, because they were making it for a market that doesn't have, like, that same cultural conversation. It's complicated, is what I'm trying to get at. It's very complicated. There isn't really one answer. It's not just, oh, racism. It's many things. It's just racism is part of it, right? And, like, I rail a lot against fucking weebs who sort of idealize Japan as this glorious ethno-state that is like that the whole world should emulate culturally, and like it's like no motherfucker, like if you know anything about that fucking country, you'll know that it's not something to emulate in that way, and you'd know that weird Japan and cool Japan and all of the like the deliberate export of its cultural products and its anime and the ways in which it uses that culture industry is not a fucking neutral thing, right? Like that's a political tool that Japan uses in the way that it engages with the world. And you should be skeptical of that and understand that much in the same way that Hollywood does a lot of propaganda for the United States empire, so too does the anime industry do a lot of propaganda for the Japanese state. That's how culture works on a global stage. Be critical. Like, understand that you are being advertised to, motherfuckers. But, you know, it doesn't matter. They'll never hear me because they are off in their own little dumbass reactionary bubble fantasy. And they don't listen to anyone from outside of that. Anyway, Matrox, do you like musical theater, and have you heard of Epic the Musical? Yes, I like musical theater on a very, very casual level, because there isn't... I can't go to Broadway. I can't go to the West End. That's not really something I can do. And Danish productions of a bunch of those musicals, I just don't feel enthusiastic about. So no, haven't heard of Epic the Musical. Most musicals are very much out of my reach unless they get a pro shot, so... Cyanide Valentine, what drove you to start playing League? Oh, she knows what she did. Like, there was a person who introduced me to it. You know who you are. You know what you did to me. You know what you have wrought on this world. And when the last day comes, my dear, you too will be judged for my sins. Yeah, no, a friend got me into it, and now here we are. Tycho, do you or have you ever played Magic the Gathering? Yes. When I was very young, like in 5th grade, I think, someone brought Magic cards to school and sort of like had 2 decks, and people tried to play against each other and shit like that. And I thought that was really, really cool. I was one of the few kids in class who could read English, so they kind of relied on me to translate what a lot of the cards did. And ever since then, I've had a fascination with Magic, but I've never really gotten into playing it. In part because for most of my life, I just haven't been in a place where Magic was something I knew I could go and play. Like I've lived in a bunch of towns that were too small to have any kind of, like, tabletop gaming scene in them. And even when I have lived in towns that might have had tabletop gaming scenes, I've been having too much social anxiety to go, you know. So I've never really played it in any meaningful way. I've always been attracted to green in terms of playstyle, because I just like putting big shit on the board and swinging for face a lot. Like, I like just, here's a big token, and here's a big thing, and here's a buff on the big thing to make it even bigger, and here's a buff that makes 5 of the big thing, and now all of them have trample, and all of them have flying, and all of them are invulnerable. Now fuck you. Like that, I like just swinging for face. I don't like spell combos and shit. I like putting down big creatures and then punching someone with them. Which I assume is still how green is played. It might not be. Who knows? Lurpa Lurpa, do Danish schools have school dances? Sort of. I don't know that it's a countrywide thing, but we did have a thing where there was a dance. It's specifically like an old-timey sort of waltz dance thing. What the fuck was it called? Casting something? I can't remember. And I was way too insecure and afraid and socially awkward to participate in it. I was horrified. I was terrified of dancing, because I could not imagine, I could not conceive of the possibility that anyone would look at me dancing and not laugh. So I stayed the fuck far away from that. I invented so many excuses to get out of that, and get away from it and run away from it, because I could not fathom the concept that I could ever be part of something like that without being ridiculed, without being seen as ridiculous, without being humiliated. That was sort of... It was also fragile masculinity, right? Like, I was never the most masculine guy in the world because I had feelings and I care about things. And So displaying any kind of passion for dance, not an option emotionally for me at that point. So there were dances. I never attended any of them. I stayed far away from them. I stayed far away from a lot of social life in high school. Because of trauma and because of things, but, you know, so they exist. People, like, there used to be, this is something that, because I grew up in a place that was fairly rural, I hate that word, there was a thing out in the provinces called Helbel, which is like, you'd get a hall of some kind. Like, traditionally, it would be like an old barn or something like that, where they just, like, fucking set up tables and some music. And then, like, all the kids from the various schools would get together and have a party, right? Like, it's like, there'd be dancing, there'd be music, there'd be drinking, quite a lot of drinking. There wasn't supposed to be, but, like, Denmark has a alcohol culture and a half, so kids, like, 13-year-olds were getting drunk quite commonly. It was fairly normal for 13-year-olds to get absolutely fucking shit-faced at parties like that. And that was sort of like, for a lot of places, especially in like rural communities, especially like small village towns around farm country, it was kind of the only thing that there was for them. Like, it was the only sort of social gathering party event that existed for kids to go to. So it's like kids as young as 12, 13, and like kids as old as like 18, 19 would all be there. And you can imagine the kind of fucking havoc and problems that caused. And that's why a lot of the 13-year-olds end up drinking, is because, like, the 16-year-olds and 19-year-olds, like, would buy them alcohol because they would ask for it. And everyone would have a big party. And, like, yeah, no. Problems occurred with that shit. There was a lot of national controversy around them, like, a bunch of moral panics and shit like that. But they were there. And they were, like, a huge source of, like, social gathering for, like, teenagers out in the sticks. Bapple. Since the Writers Guild won a big W, do you plan on covering live-action One Piece adaptation to some extent? Well, I wanted to. I still maybe want to do some shorts about it, but the moment for it passed. Like, until Season 2 drops, the moment for it in the algorithm sort of isn't there, really. Maybe I could do a video about sort of discussing the thematic implications of, like, the changes that it makes to some of the things that happen. But yeah, like, I would have to have something specific to say about it. Like, I would have to have something, I'd have to rewatch it, and I'd have to find something very specific and meaningful to say that would be worth doing, like, a main channel video about. Other than that, like, maybe shorts. I'm reaching chapter 100 on the shorts now-ish, like, we're getting there. At that point, I plan to take a small break, do a compilation, and maybe sort of reassess how I'm gonna do the best panels of One Piece going forward. Like, figure some stuff out, think about some things, and that might include, like, doing some live-action One Piece shorts and sort of comparing that to how the manga frames, like, certain action scenes and narrative scenes and shit like that. I don't know. I have thoughts about it, but no current plans. And, you know, I've said it a million times, unmedicated ADHD, so making plans about anything is a fucking crapshoot for me. Rain for Cats. How do you tell Artemis and Apollo apart? Those are my cats, by the way. Well, it's pretty easy nowadays. Like, it was hard when they were kittens, like when they were young kittens, when we first got them, because they were functionally identical, save for a few pattern differences. Now they're getting towards adulthood, like they're coming up on being a year old soonish. And now it's pretty easy, because like, Apollo is a fat boy. He's a big, fat male cat. Like, he's a tomcat, right? He's neutered, he's spayed, he's, you know, but he's a fat lad. He's a big, chunky man. He's just powerfully built. His hair, like, his fur is coarse, a little bit more coarse and, like, rough in the texture than hers is. And he is colder in his color themes. Like, he has more gray, he has more white, he has more sort of desaturated brown in his coat, and she has more orange, more red. She's much more petite and soft in her fur than he is. So it's pretty easy to tell them apart, generally. Shirley Neko, when traveling or commuting, where, if at all, can you sleep best? No. Nope. I can sometimes fall asleep on a train. On, like, a long journey, I can fall asleep on a train. But for the most part, when I'm in a car, I'm trying not to get car sick, because I get motion sickness in cars real easy. On a bus, I never sleep because buses are loud as fuck. And also, like, if I'm on a bus, I am not on a journey that is short enough that sleep is something I could contemplate. And on an airplane, I don't sleep and that's also, I've never taken a long haul flight. Like, I've never flown to the US. I've never visited the US. I've never flown to Australia or anything like that. Airplane rides for me is like, oh, this is 2 hours to get from somewhere in Europe to somewhere else in Europe, right? So no point sleeping. Googie, since you tend to talk about character design in video games and comics, have you ever thought about branching out onto games and anime that have ample designs themselves, like Fortnite or Homestuck? Would those examples not be viable for discussion because the designs themselves don't usually tend towards what storytelling, or because the stories they tell are just very nebulous or too niche? I mean, the main reason I wouldn't want to talk about Homestuck is that Homestuck fans terrify me. Like, well, no, I'm not actually. Like, they can't take me. They can't say anything. They can't do anything to me that I would particularly find. But Homestuck fans have a tendency to be insular and very protective of their thing. In a way that a lot of very dedicated fandoms are, right? Especially because Homestuck is a fandom that has suffered so much derision and mockery, right? Like, that it's natural that they're very defensive about it. And I just know, like, if I make a video about it, like, the number of people who would, like, a lot of people would be willing to get mad at me for getting stuff wrong, which I inevitably would because, you know. And I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with that kind of, like, the same reason I wouldn't do videos about Steven Universe, right? Like, it's, like, I might do, like, and specifically I'm saying I don't want to do video essays, like, deeply analytical sort of essays about, because, like, if I talk about character design in Homestuck, I have seen through passive exposure people have so many different, rich, interesting, varied interpretations of who these characters are, what these characters are, what they mean, and they are so near and dear to people's hearts. That's like, there's no way for me to make something without stepping on some of that, right? Like, there's no way for me to do, like, a video essay trying to, like, do a meaningful analysis of something without stepping into a bunch of discourses that already exist. It's like, Homestuck to me just feels like a landmine that I don't really feel any need to step on, right? And that's not what I'm not saying. That I'm not saying Homestuck fans are evil or that they're particularly likely to harass me, just that I feel that if I were to make an analysis video about it, if I were to try, I would just cause a bunch of upset and distress to a bunch of Homestuck fans, and I don't think I'd be capable of particularly persuading anyone who isn't a Homestuck fan already to give it a shot, because, like, the barrier for entry to Homestuck is not that there aren't enough video essays analyzing it. The barrier for entry to Homestuck is that Homestuck is the thing that it is. It is the, like, same as kind of the same as One Piece. It's so big, it is so specific, it has such a dedicated core audience, and it is so of its time, right? That it's like, yeah, I don't know. Homestuck is something I don't want to touch it. Like, it feels too complicated and I'll change my mind someday, maybe. But right now, emotionally, my response to that is like, no, not worth it. It's not worth diving into all of the difficulties of that. As for Fortnite, I don't find anything Fortnite does interesting. I have never seen it do anything that's interesting except as a thing to sort of look at and mock a little bit. I think there's a question later on about, like, Aang with a shotgun, the avatar skins that have come to the game, and it's like, yeah, what do I have to say about that except to say that's bad. That's not good. Like, that's a sign of the fucking end times. Like, that's a late capitalism, like, hyper exploitation of IP. Like, Fortnite is a game, like, I think Campster, what's his name, Aaron Signal, has some good videos about Fortnite. He has some interesting perspectives on it. Like, he engages with it deeply, and, like, has an interest in it, like, beyond the thing. As a piece of character design, I find Fortnite depressingly empty of meaning and purpose from a character design perspective, because it's just skins. It's a bunch of skins that sort of just... It's the Xerox principle. Like, it's a... Fortnite is a machine that creates copies of copies. And I find it very empty, right? And this is coming from someone who's not deeply engaged with Fortnite, right? This is an outsider's perspective. I could be very wrong, but that's where I am as a person right now, right? But the question you're asking more specifically is about branching out. And yes, as I've said, I want to branch out. Like, there are definitely many other spheres and places where character design exists that I want to talk about. I have a half-formed idea in my brain about a video about the character design of YouTubers, right? Like, specifically, it started as an idea of, like, talking about VTubers, but then I sort of went, like, but, like, every YouTuber has a character design because they all make choices about how to present themselves. So, like, maybe there's a video in talking about, like, what a YouTuber, the way that they present themselves, the way that they show themselves, the way that they conceptualize their own aesthetic, how that intersects with the principles of character design, which is, like, but it's a little fraught because, like, some of the people I'd be talking about, like, real people who aren't fictional characters, who aren't, like, they don't do character design on themselves in the way that you do character design on a fictional character, right? Like, I have a half-written section in my brain about Super Eyepatch Wolf, who I think, like, he has a very specific approach to, like, the way that he plays himself and the way that he plays characters, that I think might be interesting. I have some thoughts about overly sarcastic productions, like Red and Blue, the way that they present themselves in their avatars. Like, and obviously characters like Jaden Animation and, like, Rebecca Perham and, like, the odd ones out, who are, like, specifically who are artwork characters. But I would also want to talk about, like, real people, and that's a thing of, like, you have to be kind of careful about how you do that, because you're talking about their real bodies, like their real appearance, which is, like, a thing. So, yeah, I do want to branch out to a bunch of other stuff. Fortnite and Homestuck, though, no. Fortnite because it's way too empty, because there's nothing there for me to discuss, and Homestuck because it's way too full. There's too much there. There's too much, and I don't think I can do it justice. And also, my plate is very full, yes. Atlas, are there any science or nature facts that always be a complete mindfuck to you no matter how much you try to understand them? Yes. Well, I mean, just the size of planets. The size of the sun relative to the Earth fucks me up a lot. The size of Betelgeuse relative to the fucking sun fucks me up a lot. And the fact that the universe has no edge will never cease to fuck with me. Because it doesn't. It has no edge. It like, it's not just that it's infinite. There is no edge. There is no... There's no place where you go from universe to not universe. There's just universe. And even though it's 13.8 point whatever, 14 whatever, how many billion years of years old, and even though it started expanding from a single point in space and then just started expanding, which means that it should have an extent, right? It is infinite anyway, even though it at one point it was all compressed into one thing. But even while it was all compressed into one thing, it was still infinite, because that's how infinity works. And fuck you, physics. Fuck, I in a very small way, I understand why some people would like the Earth to be flat, because the moment you start considering cosmology in any kind of scientifically rigorous way, it begins to transcend the boundaries of what a human mind was really built to comprehend. We are monkeys, like, trying to comprehend it's the Terry Pratchett quote, right? We are a lucky species of ape trying to comprehend the miracle of creation using language and a brain that was only really designed to figure out where the good fruit is and tell that to the other monkeys, right? So, like, universe too big, don't like it. Scattershot, I know you talked about D&D in the past, but what other TTRPGs have you delved into? I have played World of Darkness in a campaign for like a year now. Specifically, it's one of the older editions of World of Darkness, I think. I don't remember exactly which one it is, and it's not set in the modern day, like we've set it back in like the 1890s and 1880s, La Belle Époque in France. It's set in Paris. but we're working with the World of Darkness system, and I've been having a huge amount of fun with that. Like, that's a very good time. We're all playing humans, by the way. Like, no vampires among us. There's one of us has magic powers now, at a cost. But yeah, so that's been a good time. Rain for Cats, the Shorts channel has a subscriber count of about 500,000. Well, 530,000 now. Does this number not feel overwhelming? Yes! Yes, it does. That is too many people. In the same way that the sun is too big and the universe has no edge, 500,000 is a number I don't know how to imagine 500,000 people. I can maybe get, like, I can think of a big stadium, and we can get, like, 30, 40,000 people in there. I can sort of comprehend the scale of that, but 500,000? Fuck you. I'm not imagining all that. But are there any steps you've taken in order to not be overwhelmed by the sheer scale of these numbers? I mean, the numbers just become numbers at some point, right? Like, I see the number, and I'm so familiar with the number that doesn't really register how big it is. And I'm not really, I mostly just don't think about it because it's boring. I've seen it a million times. My ADHD just glazes over it. But in terms of the scale, like, it's the scale of the response that is the problem. Like, it's the scale of the response, like, both in that a bunch of people at this point see me as a kind of celebrity, and I don't see myself that way, like, even a little fucking bit at all. I'm a guy in his fucking office, in his apartment, making videos as best he can about nerd shit, right? Like, that's who I am in my head. But there are people who treat me like a kind of celebrity, right? Like, I have a wiki, there's a YouTube wiki that I have a page on. I have a TV tropes page. Like, I had to turn off a lot of notifications and lock my accounts on Twitter because people would just, like, send me abuse randomly. Like, abuse from these incredible assumptions about who I am as a person. Like, shit that's just, like, people will just make up shit about me on the internet because I am a kind of celebrity in their mind, right? Like, they'll just make shit up. Like, they'll just decide that something about me is true, and they'll say it confidently like it is true, and, like, tell people, oh yeah, TBScan, that guy, he's like this and that, and he supports abuse, or like fucking whatever. Like, they'll make shit up. Like, it consisted of rumor for a long time that I was gay, right? Like, which, for the record, I have never told you what my sexuality is, and I don't plan to. I am aromantic. That's what you get to know. Like, people make shit up about me. Just randomly. People I have never spoken to in my life have vendettas against me, right? Like, really fucking hate my guts and want me to suffer. People I've never spoken to, people I've never interacted with, people I've never had, like, people who've never met me, for fucking sure, because I don't go anywhere and I don't meet people. I've attended, like, one convention ever in my capacity as a YouTuber, and that was a small anime convention, like, kind of in the middle of nowhere in Denmark, where I did a little panel for a few people, and that was a good time, and I felt like that was too much attention for me. like I can be comfortable on a stage, but I would rather be playing a character than being myself. So yeah, like, so, and what I do to try and manage that is I disengage. I have disengaged a lot from the social internet. My Facebook accounts are locked down and inactive. My Twitter account is locked down. I have deleted many things, removed many old things that I posted online, just because, like, not because I feel like they should be hidden or that I'm, like, trying to hide my history as such, but more in the sense of, like, I know what a person who is malicious will do with that, right? Like, dumb shit that I have said when I was younger. Like, I have a couple of old webcomics that I used to do that are bad and problematic, like, that are shitty, and which, like, I don't make any excuses for them, but also I'm not gonna give these people ammo, right? And I've disengaged from my comments a lot more. Like, there's a reason why, like, at the end of my videos now, I do this thing playing the emoji game, right? The point and purpose of that is to filter out, like, for me as a person, first of all, it's nice to get engagement, like, giving people a task, saying, hey, if you've watched the video this far, leave a comment, put that emoji in there, and I'll put a heart on. Like, that's a little exchange that we can play, where it's like, here's something, if you want to leave a comment, here's something you can do to do that, right? Like, I'm giving you a template for doing that, and that results in more engagement and more comments, and that's good for algorithm things, right? Like, it's a naked engagement bait, right? Fully admitting that. The other thing is also, it allows me to filter for people who watch the video all the way through to the end, right? If I see that emoji, that means whoever left the comment watched the video the whole way through. And they watched the whole way through, and they listened, and they cared enough to respond to my call to action, right? And that filters out a lot of bad actors. That filters out a lot of shitty people. Because, like, people who hate me, people who are shitty, first of all, they're not going to watch the video through to the end. They're going to watch until they find something to complain about, and then they're going to complain about it. And second of all, they're not going to play the emoji game with me. They're not going to care, right? Like, because that's him asking me to do something. Fuck that guy, I hate him, right? So I'm not going to do that. So, like, that acts as a soft filter where, like, I know if there is an emoji, the emoji that I asked for in a comment, that's like, okay, this one's probably not going to be, like, stressful to read through. This is probably not going to be invective. This is probably not going to be nastiness or meanness, and that makes it easier to engage with my comments. And then, like, I've set up so many fucking actual filters, like, every slur you could ever possibly think of, I have typed into that fucking thing. So many permutations of right-wing language I've typed into it. Like soy is just a word that I filter out, because, like, the only people who use the word soy for anything are people I don't want to talk to. Like, the Jews, like, just the phrase the Jews, not like and like the word Jew, just Jew. Those are filtered on my channels. Not because, like, 99% of the time, those are different, right? Like, they're not like soy. Soy is like, only shitheads kind of say that unironically. But Jew and the Jews are things of, like, 99% of the time when someone brings them up for some reason, that's fine. Like, nothing bad is happening. It's completely okay. Like, don't worry about it. But 1% of the time when they do, it is not okay. It is turbo not okay. It is the most not okay. And so, like, you filter that, because that's something like, and when I say filter something, that doesn't mean it gets auto deleted, by the way. That means it gets put in a little pile along with everything else that gets filtered, and is like, I can sort of review it, and I can deal with it, and I can decide to post it, or I can decide to block or delete it or whatever. And so, like, certain phrases have to be there, right? Like, there's certain things that, like, if someone says this phrase, right, I need to review that before that goes out on my channel. Like, Jew, the Jews are some of the words for that. Like, Zionism, Palestine, a lot of, like, sort of current events words go in that bucket as well. Whereas, like, I put those in a bucket, I go and review them later just to check and make sure that, like, people aren't posting horrendous shit in my comment sections. But that's not actually the thing you're asking about. Like, that's more just trying to be responsible about moderating and, like, preventing hate speech in my comment section. But in terms of making it easier on myself, is like slurs. I have filtered out so many slurs. I have filtered out so many phrases, so many styles of right-wing language that I just don't want to have on my channel. That I just, like, if people if someone uses these phrases, if someone uses this kind of language, sometimes it's someone just bringing it up as like, oh, this is an example of how the other guys talk. But 99% of the time, this is just those people and how they talk, right? Like, is like soy boy, beta cuck, all of that shit. Like, what the fuck are they saying nowadays? DEI was one that I added recently, right? Like CRT, a critical race theory. Like, phrases like that where it's like, yeah, leftists will say stuff like diversity, equity, and inclusion. They'll say shit like critical race theory very, very occasionally when they're discussing the specific academic discipline of critical race theory, which is like a critical legal theory that, like, people talk about in college courses about law. Sure, sometimes. But the only people who will just say that shit out of bring it up in any context whatsoever are shit-ass gamer motherfuckers and freaks that I don't want to hear from and talk to. And so there's a lot of that, right? On the Shorts channel also, like, I get something like between 10 and 40,000 comments in a month. And on the Shorts channel, I used to try and review everything that gets held for review, right? Like, everything that falls into my filters. Like, I want to check and see, is this something that needs to be filtered? Is this something that's fine to let through? I can do that on my main channel still. I can do that on my Let's Play channel. I can do that on the Reaction channel. That's perfectly manageable workloads. I can't do it on the Shorts channel anymore. There's too many comments. There's just too fucking many comments. And so now the thing I do is, like, I will take every day I'll go into the comment section of the most recent, like, 4 or 5 shorts. I will look at the comments that were held for those videos specifically, and I'll go through them. I'll approve, I'll disapprove, I'll throw them away. And then, like, as those videos move out of being the 5 most recent, I'll stop looking in the held for reviews sections for those videos. And that means that there's some videos, like Lae'zel. Like, I did a short about how Lae'zel is scared, right? Like, how the reason why Lae'zel acts the way that she does in Baldur's Gate 3 is fundamentally because she's terrified, and she's ignorant, and she doesn't know what she's doing. She wants to be a good person, but she doesn't have any fucking idea how to be one, right? And that short got so many fucking comments from people who were just posting, like, I don't care, I killed the bitch because she was a bitch to me, that cunt. Right? Like, just misogynist bullshit. Like, just, like, not just that, oh, I don't like the character, but like, oh, no, I killed her, and I danced on her corpse, and then I pissed on her, and then I like, put her corpse in a barrel, and I threw the barrel off a cliff. Like, really just, like, weird, performative, and often very misogynistically tinted cruelty. And so I set the setting on that short. Hold all of the comments. Don't let anything get posted anymore. Like, so it all just goes into the bin of comments that are held for review, and I don't look at them because there was so much just truly ugly rhetoric. Like, again, a bunch of it was just people who don't like the character, which is completely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But so much of it was just like, yeah, I hate that fucking bitch, the way that she talked to me. Like, just really nasty misogyny that just made me unhappy to look at. So that video, I'm never looking at another comment for that, and it's never going to get another comment posted, ever. Because, yeah, like, that's just a subject matter you can't trust people with, apparently. So there's a lot of that, and I'm trying to navigate all of this. I'm trying to maintain some level of responsible moderation on my channels, right? Of making some kind of active assessment of the feedback that I get, like whether or not my videos are reaching the goals that they have, like whether they're hurting anyone, whether they're problematic, whether there are faults or mistakes or problems in them. And I'm trying to do that at the same time as I'm trying to, like, stage manage YouTube comments, right? Like, I'm trying to parse and filter YouTube comments, which can be some of just the most toxic, miserable hellspace on the whole of the miserable internet. Like, I'm trying to do responsible moderation while I'm trying to filter just some of the most vile, hateful, misogynistic, homophobic, racist, ugly, transphobic, terrible garbage that I think I've ever seen anywhere on the internet. And I'm not gonna lie, it's like, I am running up against my capacity to do that at this point. Like, the future of moderation on my channels is that I'm gonna put more and more words in the word filters, and I'm gonna let more and more comments just be handled by that. And the comment section under my videos are probably gonna get more and more homogenized because of that, because there's so many words and phrases and, like, things that I have to filter, because sometimes they are signifiers of the worst abuse in the world, but which also is not going to allow certain challenging ideas from being discussed, right? Like, the ideas that might need to be discussed in good faith, earnestly, by people who are, like, trying in good faith to have good conversations about it. And I can't allow that, because it would I would need to manually look at and approve all of that. And there's just too much. I don't have the mental or the physical capacity to do it. Like, it would be the only thing I ever do with my time at some point. And until I have the kind of money that it would take to hire someone professional to handle my comments moderation for me, like, my comment section is probably going to get more and more censored. More and more sort of smoothed out and I mean, ultimately, like, the way that filtering is going to work is, like, I'll have more and more of a comment section that's just full of praise, right? Like, it's just full of positivity in a way that's not going to be very authentic. That's what I'm scared about. It's like, even though all I'm trying to do is just trying to preserve my mental health, and I'm trying to preserve my capacity to do anything, which can be sapped pretty quickly by being exposed to the worst shit in the world on the internet, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to create a filter bubble. Like a really... a quite a strong filter bubble, too, I think. One that's... yeah, that's going to shut out critical voices. That's going to shut out, like, actual, genuinely necessary, interesting, good faith criticism. And I don't like that very much, but I don't know what the fuck else to do, because I can't moderate 40,000 comments personally every month. I can't do it. No one can. I will sit here and I will make that claim right now. No one can. It will fuck you up. I don't care how thick skin you think you have. I have a thicker skin than you do. Unless you're a trans woman, unless you're a person of color, like I'm saying, if you're another white guy like me, I have a thicker skin than you do. Like, unless you do this shit for a living, I have a thicker skin than you do. I have a skin that is magnitudes thicker than yours. You couldn't handle this either. And again, I get a fraction. I get a percentage. I get the tip of the iceberg of how bad this shit can get. Like, I know trans people who are on YouTube who do work here. They get more and worse shit than me at less than half of my subscriber count. Substantially less than half of my subscriber count. Like, people with 10, 15,000 subscribers who get, like, stalkers and harassment and death threats. I get the barest tip of the iceberg of that shit. And it's like... yeah. So... I don't fucking know. Sorry, I'm going in circles here. It's just, there's a lot... I have a lot of feelings about this, can you tell? I take a lot of steps to try and not be overwhelmed, and I'm gonna have to take more steps in the future, and I'm gonna have to keep taking steps as my channel gets bigger and bigger, and it's gonna alienate me more and more from my comment section, from that part of my community that I have on my channel, and I don't know any way to do anything about that. I don't think, beyond a certain size... which, you know, that's where I'm grateful for the Discord, especially because I have kept the Discord small, which I know is frustrating for a lot of people, but because I've kept the Discord small, I've been able to maintain that as a space where I can engage, right? Like, where I can talk to people and be engaged in conversations, and, like, that is also a filter bubble. Like, the Discord is full of people who are most likely fans of my work and who tend to agree with me. So it's like, it's not like I'm going to get strong criticism from there. It's not like I'm going to get pushback from there a lot. But it's at least a place where I can fucking talk to people, where I can fucking, like, act a little bit like a human being. And that's also going to be temporary, because, like, more and more people see me as a celebrity, and as they see me as a celebrity, they don't see me as a person anymore. Like, there are a lot of people, even positively speaking, there are a lot of people for whom I'm not quite a person, but I'm someone that they admire. I am someone whose videos might have helped them through a really tough time in life. Like, I've had messages from people saying that my videos saved them from suicide, right? Like and not a ton, but like more than zero, you know, quite a bit more than zero. And that's like, I don't know how to respond to those messages, man. I don't know. Like, I've gotten those messages, and I have wanted very desperately to type out something, like to respond to it in some way, if nothing else than just to say thank you for sticking around. Like, thank you for still being here. Thank you for not leaving, you know? But I don't know what to say. I have no idea how to respond to that in a way that's not irresponsible. So yeah, like, I'm very grateful that I got to make something that saved someone's life. Like, even if that wasn't my intent, like, I wasn't making any of these videos thinking, oh yeah, this will be the thing that talks someone off the brink. Like, absolutely not. I'm very grateful that I got to do that. Like, those messages, I think, that means, hey, like, you did some good, kid. Like, if I die tomorrow, it's like, my life isn't gonna have been a waste, you know? I'll have left some legacy in the world that's worth a damn beyond gaming videos. But it's also, I don't know how to process that emotionally. I don't know how to process being a celebrity in someone's eyes. I don't know how to process someone looking at me and seeing something other than a person. Like, just a fucking guy. Which is what I am in my mind, right? Like, I'm just a fucking guy. I'm just some fucking guy who has too many opinions about video games and character design and art, and who has been validated in having those opinions so much that I've been able to practice having them and get really good at having them, and now I have an audience about having them. But I am genuinely just some fucking guy. I really am not special. And I don't say that to denigrate myself. I don't say that to engage in performative self-hatred, so much as to try and insist on a shared humanity with you. I am not special. I'm good at what I do. I'm practiced. I'm a craftsman. I know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm a good essayist. I'm a good YouTuber. I have the ADHD power of uninterrupted 2-hour speeches that I can just give on a fucking subject, apparently. But I'm not special. I am no different as a human being than any of you are. And you are, for the most part, all of you are strangers to me, just as I am a stranger to you. It's just that you've listened to my voice for so long and spent so much time in my digital company that it feels like I'm more than a person, right? More than just some guy. But I promise you, like, you saw me on the street, you wouldn't look twice. Well, you might look and go, that guy looks kind of like TB-Scan's avatar. Huh. But not so much that you would actually recognize me, is the thing. You wouldn't look twice. I am not that special. And as the subscriber count grows, that becomes a harder and harder argument to make. And that becomes a harder and harder position to occupy. Because I dread hitting 1 million. Because once you have 1 million subscribers, that means you're famous. And I don't think there's any going back from that. And that's the one thing that has me thinking, like, shit, maybe I should write that book someday. Maybe I should write that book. Maybe I should start trying to exit being a YouTuber before it gets to that point, right? Before I become a celebrity. Maybe I should try and get out and get into something else, right? Because I want to keep being a person. Mostly. That's like the main thing I want. Anyway, that fucking went off the rails from where your question went, Rain for Cat. Sorry about that. Maybe I should do a video about those feelings at some point to get them out of my head. Let's move on. Puro. So I've had a few moments in different media, mostly anime shows and video games, where things happened that were just so cruel, horrible, and inhumane that I have had to stop instantly and distract myself with other thoughts. Even though it's fiction, it hits me very hard mentally, and I couldn't bear to think about something like that ever being allowed to happen. It's too bad to depict in any kind of art. So my question is, are there things in art in general that shouldn't be allowed to be depicted in any way? Or is it just that I guess it wasn't made for me then? I mean, that's a very complicated and thorny question. My baseline answer is no, there's nothing that should be disallowed from being depicted. It is necessary for the human condition that we tell stories about the human condition. Like, that's the only way we'll survive this fucking thing. And that includes the shitty parts. That includes the horrible parts. That includes the transcendently awful parts, right? So no, there's no subject that's like, oh, you shouldn't be allowed to depict that in any way. No, absolutely not. As an absolute rule, I'll say no, right? that doesn't mean that everything is equally fair game to depict, right? Like the Turner Diaries are like, yeah, you know, maybe those books should be a little bit controlled as to who exactly gets to read them. Fascist propaganda like Hitler's Mein Kampf. I'll give you an example, actually. When I was in primary school, right? Like when I was like grades, first grade till like 10th grade, right? Whatever the fuck that is for you. In my school library, alongside the Asterix comics, alongside like the YA novels, alongside the encyclopedias, alongside the, I mean, whatever the fuck our version of the Hungry Hungry Caterpillar and Dr. Seuss was, Mein Kampf was there on the shelves. It was in a restricted section of the library. It's like you couldn't really check that book out without an adult's supervision and like them sort of like being there to talk you through what the book was. But it was there, and it was there because we learned about World War II in school. Like we had those history classes, and one of the things you could do once you got a history assignment is like you could choose to write about like what was the anti-Semitic propaganda like what was Hitler's rhetoric like, what kinds of speeches did he give, what kind of propaganda did he put out. And so in order to be able to do that, you had to be able to access Hitler's published works, which is Mein Kampf, right, his memoir. And I had a friend who did that. Like I had a friend who was like really big into World War II history and was really interested in it, and he wrote a paper for class, like for his history, a history paper when he was like 14, I think, about the rhetoric in Mein Kampf. And he checked that book out of the school library, and like he read it alongside guidance from his parents and his teachers, who sort of helped him contextualize what was going on in that book and like critically examine it. And he did that. Like, I think, what the fuck did I write my paper on about? I think I wrote about, I think it was the sea rescue. Because, like, that, in the 40s, Denmark was occupied by Germany. Like, well, occupied, I say. We put up 9 minutes of resistance, right? Like the Germans sallied over the border. The soldiers stationed at the border with Germany put up resistance for like 10 minutes or whatever, and then the government just went, "Oh, we surrender. We surrender. Come on in, take over. We'll collaborate." And we became a collaborator government. Denmark doesn't like to think of itself that way, but we were Nazi collaborators. That's what we were, objectively speaking. But one of the finest hours we had during the Second World War was that when eventually the Gestapo and like the SS and Hitler became impatient for the implementation of the final solution, right? Like they became impatient to murder all of the Jews. They gave the order to the Danish government to round up every Jew in Denmark and send them off for extermination. And the Danish government refused. They said, nope, we're not fucking doing that. All of us are resigning en masse, immediately resigning. And a massive rescue effort was coordinated. Like every single Jewish person that anyone could get a hold of was smuggled out of towns, out of cities, out of villages. They were smuggled to the harbors where people with fishing vessels, like of which there are many in Denmark, just like fishing vessels, private ships, took them on their boats and they sailed them to Sweden and Norway, like to hide there and to try and hide in neutral territory and to get away from the final solution. And many, many thousands of Jewish lives were saved that way. It is one of the very few parts of like national history where I genuinely sort of go, yeah, no, I'm proud of my country for that one. And it's more complicated than I have said here. Like, it's not, Denmark was not some kind of magical hideaway of like, oh, everyone here is against anti-Semitism or against, no. Like I said, we were collaborators for a reason. But that was one of our finest hours as a country, like as a national entity. That was one of the few times where we did some good for once. So I wrote a paper about that. And like also like me writing that paper, I had to like part of writing that paper, I remember, was I looked at anti-Jewish propaganda. I looked at anti-Semitic propaganda, like posters and like writings and like the writing of Danish politicians at the time who supported anti-Semitic propaganda, who propagated, who collaborated happily, very happily with the SS. The kinds of things they wrote about Jews. Right, like the ways they wrote about them, and the dehumanization, and the brutality, and the cruelty. And I was exposed to all of that as like a 14, 13-year-old kid, right? With the guidance of my teachers and my parents helping me to understand how to process this critically, right? And like, so yeah, like I don't think 14-year-olds in general should read Hitler's Mein Kampf, right? Like, that's not a good idea. People should not be exposed to those ideas without filter, without having the critical reading skills to understand them, or having someone who can help guide them through what the actual meaning of what's being said is, right? Of how to disentangle rhetoric and propaganda and understand what is being said and why it's being said. But the book should be there, right? Like, it's... I don't especially want Hitler's words to survive in the world. Like, I don't want people to spend much time reading him, but the book needs to be there. It needs to be preserved, and it needs to be accessible for people to read so that we can understand it and incorporate it into our historical memory, so that we know that this was a thing that happened and we know exactly what it looked like when it happened, right? Like, those things are necessary for any kind of like healthy understanding of history. You have to have those horrible, horrible, horrible things there, right? And that includes like descriptions of abject brutality, right? Because one thing about fiction is, however gruesome you think the thing that you're reading about in fiction is, like however awful, however like whatever depravity you can imagine in your mind, I promise you humanity has done worse. If you want to really traumatize yourself someday, and I don't recommend that you do necessarily, but if you want to understand how bad it can get, read up on the Rape of Nanking. Read up on the Japanese occupations in East Asia. Because whatever you can imagine in your head, however terrible, like whatever awful thing you read in fiction, the bloodiest, most psychotic, or well, I shouldn't say psychotic. That's kind of sadist. But like the bloodiest, most cruel-minded, edgiest, like shittiest, gore-fest splatter horror director in the world could not imagine cruelty as deep as that which people do to each other in real life. And one of the things that art is capable of doing is preparing us for that. Right? Not in the sense of, oh, it makes trauma go away, or it makes you capable of enduring unending horrors without damage, but in the sense of it allows you to conceptualize that there are things that are awful beyond your conception. It allows you to process that those horrifying things happen and happened and have happened and will happen. It allows us to make it into something other than just a numbing horror. Fiction allows us some small measure of control over the world in that way, emotionally. And that matters, right? None of this is to say that you should expose yourself to traumatizing art. Right, like this is not, oh, you're such a snowflake for not reading trauma, like for not reading torture porn. Like, no, absolutely not. None of that. Just that for some people who have been through truly horrendous shit, seeing that shit depicted in art can be re-traumatizing. It can be horrible. It can be damaging and terrible. For others, it is necessary. It is a necessary part of trying to come to terms with it in some way. Like, trauma survivors can find it absolutely necessary to depict the horrors that happened to them in art in order to get past them, right? In order to start to feel them, in order to start to even begin to process what has happened to them. Art, some kind of expression of the thing that happened to them, can be absolutely necessary. And so if you go with this thing of like, well, this should never be depicted because it's too evil, the people who are most hurt by that, like the people who get most punished and damaged by that, are the people who've been victims of it. Like, those are the ones who will take the most damage from that, whereas people who have never been the victim of this kind of cruelty and evil, I mean, yeah, they just get to avoid confronting something that's uncomfortable, right? Like, that's the benefit for them. Yeah, like, it's a complicated subject that you've brought up here, and it's 3:53 a.m., and I'm a little sleep deprived, and I have not had a lot of caffeine today. So, I guess the point I'm trying to get at, it's more complicated than that. It's more complicated than, oh, some things should never be depicted, and it's more complicated than, oh, well, that was just not made for me then. Because that's not also, like, art can also be harmful, right? Like I said, 14-year-old should not be reading Mein Kampf without some fucking oversight from a teacher, right? That book, the words that are in it, the propaganda that's in it, like fascist propaganda, can be directly fucking harmful in the world. It can cause actual tangible material harm and damage in the world if it is not engaged with in a critical manner, right? But the solution to that problem is education, is for people to be taught how to process these things, how to read these things, how to be critical, how to understand. That's the thing that is more important. Like, to me, that's the Problemstelling. That is the question. That is the problem that it is more important to solve, rather than what art should be allowed to exist. The problem that is more important to solve is, what can we do to make people capable of dealing with art of all kinds without being damaged by it? Like, what can we do to neutralize the ability of harmful art to do damage when people encounter it, rather than how can we prevent harmful art from existing in the first place? Because you can't, right? Censorship is always a losing battle. So the better thing is, like, what can we do to prepare people? What can we do to educate, to arm people, to give people the tools that they need so that potentially harmful art cannot do harm through them or to them, right? How can we give people the tools they need to defend themselves and to disarm the dangerous and harmful things? To me, that's the more pertinent question. That's the more pertinent problem to solve, rather than make a list of things that are acceptable or unacceptable, you know? Again, I am really, really not suggesting that you should expose yourself to traumatizing art. Absolutely not. I might suggest that if you are having trouble with particularly traumatizing forms of art, it might be worth seeking out education about it. Like, depending on what it is, I don't know, like, I'm not going to speak on your specific situation. There might be a way for you to, like, there might be some tools in the world, there might be some critical tools, there might be some forms of discourse or some forms of analysis that will allow you to engage with this stuff safely without being hurt, like, without being so pained by it. Maybe. Right, like, I think that's broadly, again, I don't know your situation, I don't know what you've been through, like, or why it hits you so hard. But I think broadly that's probably more productive. Probably. Fuck if I know. Anna Anton, thank you very much for a lighthearted question. You like Björk? If so, what's your favorite album of hers? I've never really been into her. Like, I've been exposed to her music here and there. I think she's a fascinating artist. I think she's done some incredibly creative, interesting things. I've never really listened to any of her albums, so I don't have a stronger opinion on her. Anyway, has there been a piece of art that on paper seemed like something you would definitely have vibed with, but for whatever reason it failed to resonate properly once you experienced it? Yeah, again, Jujutsu Kaisen is another one. Like, it's really so much about Jujutsu Kaisen is my exact shit. Like, this is, so much of it is made specifically for me as a person, like laser targeted to me. So much of it does stuff that I wish that other shonen would do. Like, just the thing that it built into its universe, that the more you explain your cursed technique, the more powerful it becomes, because it works partly on, like, the mindscape and the mentality of your opponent. It's like, fuck, that is good. Like, that's such a good way to engage with the ridiculousness of storytelling, shonen storytelling, where you have to explain all the fucking complicated superpowers somehow. Oh, that's so good. That's so clever, and I like ghost stories, right? Like, so much of what Jujutsu Kaisen does should be my exact thing. It should be my porn. It should be my cocaine. It should be my thing. And yet, I just don't think it's good. I think it's so fucking mid. I can't with it. Like, no. I should love it, but I just can't. Okashido, have you ever taken a glance at the Persona series or how it designs its enemies, characters, and bosses, and how they interpret Jungian philosophy and tarot to support their stories? Yes and no. I played Persona 5 a lot. I think I played 65 hours, and I didn't finish it. But I ran into the predatory gay stereotypes in that game. Like the two men who'll show up and like... And they are such naked gay pedophile stereotypes. Like, really just some pure fucking 1970s shit. Of, like, these two men are gay, and therefore, they want to sexually abuse children. And that is what those characters are. That is the whole of the way that those characters are. That's the whole of how they're presented. I think they got censored a bit, or, like, brought down a bit in some later localizations, but that's what they are. They are pedophilic, predatory gay stereotypes, uncritically, completely fucking uncritically presented as fun haha comedy bits, and I could not stomach it. I could not fucking stomach it. Like, and it's like, again, that's the thing about, like, all media is problematic. All media is the product of a certain culture. I have overlooked more problematic things in other kinds of media before, right? There are plenty of types of media that I enjoy that are deeply problematic, that have that have racist, sexist, homophobic, misogynistic themes and things and stuff that happens in them, but they have other qualities that recommend them. Like, and I sort of, not in the sense that I excuse any of it and I say, oh, that's okay because it's of its time. No, it's not okay. It's fucking shit. And yet there are things here that I enjoy, that speak to me, that matter to me, that, like, so that I am willing to, like, sit through the painful, ugly parts to get to the good parts that I love, right? Like, that's how like, there are a few Lovecraft stories that I have read and enjoyed very much while going, oh my god, he's so racist. Holy fuck. Oh my god, shut the fuck up about mixed race people. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up about them. Please stop talking, you racist piece of shit. Right? Like, where so much of it is so trash. Like, just, oh my god, unbearable. And yet there are some qualities that Lovecraft has as a writer that's like, that are worth experiencing. Right? That mean something. That can resonate. So it's not like, I'm not sitting here saying that, like, Persona 5 is the most homophobic thing that has ever existed, just that the specific homophobia that's in there, that specific gay predatory stereotype is just... I can't stomach it. And I can't stomach it in part in the context of the rest of Atlus's work, which is like this series of stories about these adolescent children, like, discovering their identities and coming into their own, and there's never a gay fucking character. There's never a gay romance option for a guy. Right, like, and the general reactionary vibe that the Persona games often have, where it's like, yeah, these are games about, like, being cool and rebellious teenagers who are going outside of the system in order to do a thing, and then by the fucking end of it, it's like, and then he went on to become like, it's that Harry Potter ending, where it's like, and then he went on to become normal, integrated, like, regular member part of society, and that's the good ending, right? Like, it's... There is a reactionary, there is a conservative bent to a lot of Atlus's first-party output. Like, I'm thinking of something like Catherine as well. The way that Catherine handles its trans character is just... It makes my skin crawl. I can't stomach it. Right? Like, I just can't push past those bad things to maybe enjoy some good things, right, that matter about those stories. And trans people have a lot of different and varied opinions about Catherine. Like, I've seen trans people argue both sides of whether or not it's pure transphobia or whether or not it's trying to do something good heart. Like, and that's not for me to argue. Just that in the context of Atlus games, in the context of what I know and understand about, like, the way that that company makes stories, seeing that particular stereotype, like, that's fucking walking groomer slur of a character duo presented in the game uncritically, as though, oh yeah, that's just what gay men are like, that's just haha funny because they want, like, gay men want to fucking sexually humiliate and violate children, ha 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 ha. it makes me incandescently angry. Because, like, in part because I remember that slur being levied. Like, grew up in the 90s, right? Like, I remember that being normal. I remember back when that was the thing that was just said casually by everyone. Because that was a normal, okay thing to say. And in a game like Persona 5, where you have these, you go into these mind palaces and you try to set people's ways right, that has this moralistic bent, like that has this real attempt to draw out some kind of morality about like the ways in which we treat our fellow human beings. That's what Persona 5 concerns itself with, is like, hey, we should try to be better people, we should try to be more empathetic, we should try to be kinder, we should try, and then to have that shit show up, I cannot abide it. I can't sit through it. I get such a rising bile in my throat. And it just makes, like... And if I'm gonna play a video game, I don't want to feel like that about it. Like, maybe I'll replay Persona 5 one day and do a video essay about how I feel about that shit, because I think someday I'm gonna have to get it out, but... Yeah, no, I can't. I can't with Atlus Games. Their first-party Persona, Shin Megami Tensei. I can't. I just can't stomach it. Noir Void, if you had the chance to select and guide one ASU for Riot, which champion would it be in, and what direction would you take them in? I mean, shit, I've already made the video, right? Like, Ash. I stand by that both of the versions of Ash that me and Applecork came up with are... I hesitate to say objectively, because nothing in art is objective, but, like, I could make the argument that our versions are objectively superior, from the perspective of telling the story of the Freljord as it purports to want to be told. Both of our versions are superior. They are better. Like, I will stand on business. I'll make that argument. And again, with the recognition that nothing in art is objective and, like, there are other considerations, I think we did better designs. So, like, you want to know what direction I take them in, that's the video. Similar to the above, if you could completely rework the lore of one champion, whether it be to connect them to other champions or fix the lore for whatever reason, who would you rewrite? I would probably do Seraphine. Yeah, I'd do Seraphine. Because Riot mishandled her terribly. Like, I talked about that, I think, extensively in my What's the Deal video about her way back in the day. But, like, Seraphine is a character with so much potential. Like, especially in the context of Piltover and Zaun, especially in the context of the class conflict, I don't understand why they didn't specifically make her an activist, like an activist singer, like a protest singer. Why they didn't make her a musical activist. Why, like, they went with, oh, she's a soft little, she just wants everyone to be friends and get along and be happy, and she just wants everyone to harmonize. Kumbaya, my lord. Like, that's how they wrote her, is that she's this insubstantial, painfully naive dipshit a little bit, like, who was completely, almost forcibly ignorant of the actual forces of like, material difference that are driving Piltover and Zaun apart. That, like, children in Zaun are dying of poison, and they're being poisoned to feed the industries that keep Piltover rich, right? That's not... You can't just sing-songy, oh, well, if everyone just understood each other and had more empathy for one another, then the cities wouldn't be in conflict, la 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 la. That's not how the fuck that works, right? And I despise that Riot wrote her as so painfully naive, when the whole point of her story, the way that she was written, is that she has lived in both cities. She has seen both worlds. That's what makes her unique. That's what makes her special, that she could begin to bridge the empathy gap between these two groups of people. And then they go, well, both sides, you know, both sides are wrong for hating each other. And if both sides came together, both sides, and both sides were a little bit nicer to both sides, then both sides could be a little bit happier, and both sides would maybe not be so upset about whatever it is that they're so upset about. Like, I hate the naivete that is inherent to the way that Seraphine was written. I hate it. I hate that they wrote her as so disconnected. as so oblivious, as so insubstantial, like with no gravitas, with no weight of experience. I hate that. That really, it rankles me. It's one of the big problems with the character, right? Like it's, and I would rewrite her to be someone who like not that she's not a pop star, not that she doesn't play pop music, not that she's not femme, not that she's not soft, not that she's not sweet, not that she's not loving, not that she's not empathetic, but that she understands the fucking conditions that she's talking about, right? That one side has children dying in chemical swamps and of hunger and starvation on the street, and the other side lives in mansions. Right, like someone who has like a clarity of perspective that like the middle class in Piltover has to turn its solidarity towards the lower classes in Zaun, right? Like that there is one side that has a greater responsibility to move, and that there's one side that has a greater right to its anger. That's what I would change, right? And not, again, not necessarily to make her a Marxist or a socialist or a communist or whatever, because she doesn't need to be any of those things in order to be like a freedom fighter. Like she could, like, there are ways to do that, like while writing a character who is kind of conservative, you know. That is possible to do. But just anything other than the unbearable naivete with which she's written as she stands right now. Legends of Runeterra did some good work with that. Like they kind of made sure to move her a little bit so that we saw her more explicitly engaging with Zaun in a way that feels like she understands them, and that I really enjoyed. Like it took some good steps to sort of puncture her social media influencer image and make her a little bit more human, and I like that. But oh my good lord, I'm not impressed with the way that she's written as standard. Game Ahmed, has there been any one piece of media that you once thought wasn't your thing and then enjoyed once you actually engaged with that media? Yes, Moulin Rouge. Like that. This is ancient times. Like when I was a teenager, much like I said about like the school dance and how I was afraid of dancing and shit. Like I used to be terrified of anything that was girly, right? I used to be terrified of anything that was like emotional, anything that demanded emotional vulnerability. I used to be very intellectualizing, right? Like everything is logic, everything is reason, everything is rationality up in the head, because we don't want to deal with what's in our hearts, because that's scary and vulnerable and emotional. Like, ooh, someone might make fun of us for that. But then I watched Moulin Rouge, and it fucking got me, man. Like it made me engage emotionally with a musical, right? Which had been a genre that I had dismissed as like frivolous and silly and stupid. And why is everyone singing all the time? That's dumb. Like why? Like you have to break into song to express your emotions. Like I thought that was stupid. But then I watched Moulin Rouge and I got taken away by it. And I just, even though it's a jukebox musical, right? Like it's a musical that uses pop songs rather than sort of original score songs a lot of the time. It got me, man. And like, I vibed the fuck out of that. Like it didn't turn me on to musicals immediately, but I created an exception in my head. It's like, musicals suck, they all suck, they're stupid. Singing instead of talking dialogue is stupid. Like stylization instead of realism is stupid. But Moulin Rouge is pretty good. Like that one's fun. That one's funny. Like it's ironic. Something I enjoy it ironically. I don't know. Like I made up some excuse, right? And then that stuck in the back of my head. But like that became eventually one of the pieces of media that sort of helped guide me out of this hyper-intellectualization of media, like where I only wanted to engage with media with my brain, like with my rational, logical thinking brain, and not with my feelings at all. Rain for Cats. I recently noticed that the name on YouTube is now TB Skyn with spaces between TB and Skyn. I'm curious as to why that change was made. No, that change was not made. That has always been the case since the very beginning of the channel, and I'll tell you the reason why is because when I made my YouTube channel account, it insisted that I write down a first name and a last name, right? So what you're actually seeing is that YouTube thinks, or it's displaying that my first name is T and my last name is B Skyen. It's because YouTube just enforced, like, had a weird thing with the sign-up form back then that enforced those spaces. And I just tried to get around it. And I think I could change it back if I wanted to, but it's like the URL is the same, and it doesn't fucking matter. So that's just the way that it is. Okay, let's see. Rain for Cats, question 2. Apologies if this is too general. It's okay. I'm gonna skim your question for a second to try and figure out what you're asking here. Oh, okay. Right. Okay. You commented on Adam's awful behavior in Hazbin Hotel and mentioned having actually met a person like him. What do you think someone could do when they're forced to interact with that kind of person? How can you get out on the other side of that kind of behavior unscathed? I mean, like, my advice is don't engage with them. Like, they are there. They're gonna say they're dumb like, if you are in a position where you're not in a position of any kind of power, right? Like, you can't smack them in the face and tell them to shut the fuck up, right? You can't tell them to be silent. You don't have, like, the social authority, whatever. Like, you don't have the means to simply walk out. If you're, like, stuck with them and you can't, like, they're your boss, for example, or something like that, it's like, you don't engage with them if you can at all help it, right? Like, they say all of their, oh yeah, you know what, actually, like, because of, like, men are superior intellectually and women are good at feelings and stuff, and that's why they should be housewives. You don't take the bait, right? Like especially, like, if it's someone who's, like, a real piece of shit who likes to humiliate and dominate people, like, that's Adam in Hazbin Hotel, who likes to, like, to assert power over other people, to humiliate them, to dominate them, who brings up uncomfortable, unhappy topics specifically in order to get people to get into fights, so that, like there's a specific type of person, right, who will intentionally say the offensive thing, right? Like, who will intentionally say the shitty misogynist thing, right? And then when you get upset about that, when you say, that's fucking shitty and misogynist, shut the fuck up, what the fuck is wrong with you? They go, ah, well, you're so emotional and irrational, and I'm so calm and rational, and that means that you lose the argument. Touche, good try, blah, blah, blah. Like that shit. The only thing you can really do is not give them ammo. Like, stonewall them. They come up to you and say that shit, and you just kind of go, okay. And then you go back to what you're doing. Right? Oh, okay, are you done talking? Is that all you wanted to say to me? Okay, fair enough. Thank you for sharing. Go back to what you were doing. Don't engage. Like, don't give them ammo. But, like, it depends on what kind of shithead it is, right? It depends on the power relationship you have. But the best thing is, like, don't give them space in your head. Don't let them in. Don't let them dominate your thoughts. Don't let them control your mood or how you're feeling. As much as possible, simply do not give them the time of day. Do not let them define your time and what you think about. Don't try to argue with them if you can help it. Because they are not available to be persuaded. That's one of the really difficult things, is that, like, if someone is real into the shitty stuff, like if someone is real into AI art and crypto, those are not things that they believe in rationally. Those are things that they have adopted as the next big thing. Like, oh, like crypto people, for example. Crypto's the future. Like, crypto's going to be everywhere. Crypto's going to be the main thing. Having NFTs, that's going to be how you make money. It's going to be the future of all art markets. Like, that means they have invested their own money into that shit. Like, they have actual money riding on the thing that they're saying being true, which means you can't persuade them otherwise, because they need this thing to be true. This needs to be true, because if it's not, oh fuck, I'm in a lot of trouble, right? Like, and that's also the case with misogyny a lot of the time, is part of the emotional impetus for men who sort of invest very heavily in misogyny as part of their personality, is that they need misogyny to be true, right? Like, they need all their misogynistic, stupid, dumbass, shit-fuck, moron opinions to be true, because that is their only source of self-worth, right? Like, they have tied their identity, their self-worth up with the idea of being superior to women. So that can't be challenged, because then the whole basis for their personality comes crashing down around them. And that means you can't persuade them, right? Like, you cannot talk them out of it through conversation, just by, like, especially if you're not, like, unless you are a very close family member who has, like, an emotional hold over them, like some kind of something, you cannot talk them out of it because they need this shit to be true. Because if it isn't, their whole world, their whole self-conception tumbles down around them. If it isn't, all of a sudden, they have been doing the wrong thing. They have been the bad guy, basically, their whole lives. And they don't have the emotional fortitude to handle that, right? So, like, one thing I will advise you against in general is don't try to argue with them. Don't try to persuade them of anything. Like, don't try to change their mind, because most of the time you can't. When it's someone who's, like, real... who for whom... this is a... if you run into someone for whom this shit is a matter of identity, this shit is a matter of, like, I'm an entrepreneur, I invest in AI and crypto, like, that makes me an entrepreneur, I'm a businessman, I'm a business person who does... like, you can't talk them out of that, ever, right? You cannot argue with them, you cannot debate with them, you cannot persuade them, there is no point trying. So don't give them anything. Don't engage with them. Whenever they try and bring that shit up, whenever they try to poke you, whenever they try to get you to get in as much as possible, ignore them. And that can set some of them off, like especially a misogynistic man will get set off by anyone who's not a man ignoring him. And also by men ignoring him, like, because they can't handle that, especially people who invest themselves in being alphas, right? Like, they cannot handle being ignored. So be careful, right? There's no universal advice for this, but my general advice is don't try to persuade something out of an identity position, because you can't. You cannot logic them out of a position that they did not logic themselves into. Atlas, have you ever shiny hunted in a Pokemon game or encountered a shiny Pokemon? I think, genuinely, the only shiny I have ever encountered... like, first of all, there's the shiny Gyarados in the Lake of Rage. Everyone gets that one. It's a shiny Pidgey that I didn't catch. And I think that was Fire Red, and I was playing on an emulator, and I was, like, speed boosting through a patch of grass, and I just kind of... I was just, like, rapid tapping A because I was grinding up that Charmander or something, and I just killed it. And that made me mad. Kenji the Snick, do you think you'll be doing music reactions on 3B Sky? Maybe. It's the most risky kind of content, like even more risky than doing anime is music, because like even 10-15 seconds of music can get you copyright struck. So I don't know. Maybe. Very, very, very maybe. But not anytime soon. Let's see. Cry Like an Eagle. With the amount of Soulsborne videos you've made on the channel over the years, have you ever started to think of yourself as a Soulsborne content creator? And or is there any piece or game or piece of media outside of League you particularly identify yourself with? No, I've never thought of myself as a Soulsborne creator. And like I've never really wanted to think of myself as a League of Legends creator either. I have accepted that that's what I am. Like materially speaking, that's the majority of the content on my channel. That's just the way it is. But it's not what I want to be. And I don't want to be a Soulsborne creator either. I don't want to be an anything creator as such. I want to make videos about art and games and like things that interest me. Right? That's what I want to be, and that's how I identify myself. So no, I don't think of myself as a Soulsborne content creator. And as for media outside of League, I identify too much. Discworld. I really fucking love the old video game Transport Tycoon. Like that's a comfort food game for me. I have more hours in that than I can possibly imagine. Yeah, like I have so much media outside of League that I identify myself with. Like too much. I wouldn't know how to begin to name it. CD, thoughts on Aang in Fortnite and where the last air nomad using a gun sits on the scale of it makes no sense and that's funny versus it makes no sense and that's sad. Oh, I don't put it on either of those scales. I think it's empty. Like, it's not funny. It's not sad. It's empty. Like, that's the thing about, like, Fortnite. Like, it is the franchiseification. It is the ultimate monetization of art. Right? It is... Here is a thing that has no narrative value, no artistic value, no no contribution, that doesn't mean anything, that doesn't do anything except, oh hey, it's the thing from the thing that I recognize. And that's Aang with a gun, and that's like John Wick, and that's fucking Family Guy Peter Griffin, and all the rest of them. Like, it's all of that shit getting thrown into the Fortnite tumbler, and just polished, like it's a rock tumbler that polishes everything fucking smooth to a mirror sheen, and shits it out, and goes, look at all the shiny rocks! And every edge that might have made any of the rocks interesting has been removed, and all of the rocks just look identically shiny to each other. That's what it is. It's like, it's not funny, it's not sad, it's just empty. It doesn't mean anything. It's meaningless. It is void of point and purpose. The only point and purpose is to allow people to pay for Avatar: The Last Airbender skins in Fortnite. That's the reason why Aang is in Fortnite, is so that people can pay to play as Aang in Fortnite. That's it. It's that empty, right? And again, this is where I would recommend Aaron Signal's videos on Fortnite, because he has a more nuanced take on the point of Fortnite as like being the ultimate block party, of being like a sort of party atmosphere, like a social event, social hangout space kind of thing place, where it makes some degree of sense to wear like skins of your favorite whatevers as a means to sort of engage with and show and identify publicly as parts of those things. Like Dan Olsen's video about manufacturer discontent in Fortnite also touches on this, right? Sure, like for people who are really into it, maybe it means something, but for me, it's just empty. I feel nothing. Nothing. It is a mirage in the desert. It is an empty signifier. It is sound and fury, right? Like, it's nothing. Let's see. Matrox, do you have any recommendations on new sources or opinion pieces that help you recalibrate outside of your own groups and ideas that aren't just the septic tank of hyper-aggressive anti-left-wing rhetoric? Right, okay. Get off the internet is my recommendation there. Read books. That's really, like, I would advise, like, find the thinkers, find the intellectual figures that have these positions that you disagree with, and then read actual serious academic scholarly writing by them. Don't watch fucking Matt Walsh documentaries. Like, don't follow Andrew Tate on social media. Those things, like, there's nothing there. Like, they are not trying to present an idea or be persuasive about anything. Read a Jordan Peterson book, right? I hear they're shit. I haven't read any of his books yet. I've kind of been meaning to. But I have read, like, multiple books, like, that are by right-wing thinkers. Like, I read I can't remember who the fuck the author was, but it was, like, he was, like, a right-wing sort of British Empire apologist, and he wrote a history of, like, the British occupation of India. And it was a really fascinating read. I mean, I could not tell you how many times I had to stop and kind of go, that's not how you treat a source like that, you incomprehensible hack piece of shit. You fucking apologist moron. You thick leaf holder for genocide. Like, hated everything he had to say, every word out of his mouth, despised his rhetoric, despised his ideas. Terrible, but enlightening. Like, it was a very enlightening look into the imperialist mindset, into the way that imperialists think of empire, into the way that white supremacists think about their white supremacy, right? Or specifically, the way that they don't, right? Because, of course, he doesn't recognize white supremacy as a thing. He doesn't recognize white supremacy as a set of motivators for the British Empire. So he made up and engaged with a bunch of made up excuses for empire. And the ways that he did that were interesting. Like, they elucidated a lot about how these people think of themselves and why they think the way that they do. In a way that I found a lot more productive than trying to glean anything useful from shitheads on Twitter, right? Don't try to get anything out of, like, politicians on TV. Don't try to get anything out of people on social. Like, not saying nothing can be extracted from those places. It's just, as a layperson, as an ordinary human being, don't try. Like, pick up a book about a specific point in time in history from like someone who's political ideals you align with, and then pick up a book about the same period in history from someone whose political position you vastly disagree with. Compare the two, assess them, think about them critically, and like find that your position has shifted on something, or that you have a more nuanced perspective on something. Read books, for the love of God, books. And read them critically, of course. And shit, that was it, wasn't it? I think that was it. That was all of them. There was like 46 of them this time, and some of them went long. Very long. Yeah, I'm a little sleep deprived and tired, and I'm a little in my feelings, and I think that's why some of those answers went a bit long. So I hope you'll be forgiving of me. Especially if I said something dumb or head ass or put my foot in my mouth about something. I don't know that this was my most well-considered series of opinions ever. But yeah, that was a Q&A podcast. 3 fucking hours. Jesus. I should do these a little bit more frequently. I say to myself. Let's... Who wants to take bets on whether I will? Well, you know what? I'm getting my medication, hopefully, fingers crossed, so fucking hard, at the end of this month. And then maybe, you know, maybe things can be a little more structured in the future. God, I hope so. Anyway, thank you. If you want to ask me a question, again, a one-time donation on Coffee. Just remember to link your Discord. Being a Nitro booster on Discord, being a Patreon supporter, being a member of any of the channels. Any way that you support me where you actually give me any number of money directly will give you access to the Discord, and you can ask questions there, and I will answer them eventually. Thanks for listening. Bye.